Chapter 1959. After returning from the hospital, Xia Hanyang temporarily postponed his work. He just stayed at home. Depression was a terrible thing. Even in the early stages, the patient could suffer endless torture. Wei Wei Bai was not in a good state. Her whispered words of like were like a fragile dream. But it gave him infinite hope. It didn't matter how much she liked him. It was fine as long as she liked him. There was a popular saying on the internet. As long as she took one step, he could take the remaining 99 steps. Xia Hanyang felt that even if Wei Wei Bai only took 1/10 of a step, he could run to her side no matter how many steps were left. In the 6 years that she left, he didn't dare to investigate where she went. Because this period of separation was too heavy. Every time he uncovered it, it tore his heart that had just healed. But Wei Wei Bai's words of love gave him the courage to face those days. With Wei Wei Bai's personality and ability, she couldn't have been so poor. 10 million was enough for her to squander. But when they first met, she was standing in front of him. She had nothing. If it weren't for the 6 years in between. He thought that she hadn't left and still didn't know him. The Wei Wei Bai who had nothing. Even the school uniform was the same. Xia Hanyang even suspected that Wei Wei Bai's self-inflicted inferiority complex could be so heavy. It was all because of these 6 years. He picked up an orange and began to peel it. After Wei Wei Bai confessed, she seemed to be much more relaxed and ate more. Xia Hanyang glanced at her from time to time. Seeing that she was lazily playing mobile games, he didn't say much. She said that she was bored and didn't want to move. Xia Hanyang immediately connected the internet cable. He didn't want to connect so early. After all, if he gave her the internet, she would have more leverage whether she ran away or stayed away from him. In the end, it was her words of love. It made him feel a sense of security. And he couldn't bear to see her in pain. Wei Wei Bai connected to the internet to play a game that was recently popular. Xia Hanyang saw that she was having fun, so he also went up. But he wasn't interested in games, so he didn't play. Early depression was easier to recover from. Xia Hanyang was more experienced in this aspect. He stuffed a piece of orange into her mouth. Wei Wei Bai, who was having fun playing the game, didn't notice that food was being stuffed. Like a cat being fed, she raised her head to look at him. Her expression was indescribably adorable. Then, when the game reached a critical point, she couldn't care less. She didn't protest and continued to play the game while eating the oranges. Then it became Xia Hanyang's turn to feed Tangerine. She played the game. When there were only a few pieces of orange left, he said casually, "You're having so much fun. Haven't you played before?" Bai Weiwei didn't think too much about it. How could I have played it, not to mention games, even books? She was jolted awake almost immediately. Her hand paused, and the character's HP bar was almost emptied. Bai Weiwei returned to her senses and hurriedly used a first aid kit on the character. Xia Hanyang's eyes darkened. Never played the game. She didn't sound like she hadn't played the game before, but she didn't have the chance to play the game at all. Maybe she was too obedient to play the game. After all, Wei Wei Bai was very hardworking and obedient when she was studying. She didn't have any hobbies. Xia Hanyang didn't say anything and continued to feed her the orange. Wei Wei Bai seemed absent-minded. Her character died a few times. Xia Hanyang saw her actions but didn't say anything. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://m/sashu. com//. Chapter 1960. And so, the topic came to an end. Wei Wei Bai was relieved that her words didn't arouse any suspicion. She continued to play games on her phone. Xia Hanyang was now obedient to her. As long as she was happy. He picked up his laptop and started to work. Wei Wei Bai glanced at Xia Hanyang. The man's side profile was handsome and cold. Under the light, his silhouette was perfect. His eyes were cold and heavy as he stared at his work. He was so serious that it was depressing. She probably couldn't slack off working under such a person. Wei Wei Bai said to the system casually, "Maybe I have to do something to change Xia Hanyang's opinion of me and let me go out." She tried every means to provoke Xia Hanyang. She made him irritable and finally said what was on his mind. Only then would she have the chance to confess. Xia Hanyang was too guarded. Usually, she would say that she liked him 100 times. When he heard that, he would only lock the door tighter. It wasn't easy to make him believe that she liked him. He immediately pulled the net. But it wasn't appropriate to ask for more now. The system was knitting a woolen hat. He nagged, "Can't you just live a good life? Don't do anything. It's a lifetime. It's better to live a peaceful life. Isn't it just a few years? Get along well with him. After 8 or 10 years, he will believe you." Wei Wei Bai, why did the system sound like a good wife and mother? Did she miss out on some of his growth experiences? Wei Wei Bai smiled while playing games. "Xia Hanyang won't doubt me if I don't do anything. I'm waiting for him to ask. These 6 years are enough for me to compete with him." The system silently knitted a hat. "You just slept for 6 years. How was it miserable?" He had knitted 20 hats, 10 sweaters, and 3 scarves. He had gained 2 days of life points. "So, let's not do anything, okay?" Knitting sweaters was wonderful. He finished his work at around 10 o'clock. Wei Wei Bai also finished playing games. Xia Hanyang pulled her very calmly and said, "Go to sleep. Get up early tomorrow and go running with me." Wei Wei Bai was a little slow as she blinked her eyes, seemingly unable to understand his words. Running. Xia Hanyang was also very determined. He was afraid that she would run away. This thought caused him great pain. When he locked her up, he felt a sick sense of security. But this is wrong. Xia Hanyang felt that his illness should be treated. Locking her up for the rest of her life, could she get the love she wanted? He couldn't. In the past, he didn't have any expectations and felt that she wouldn't love him even if she didn't shut him down. Even if he couldn't get the heart, it was still good to get the person. He knew that he was such a beast. But now, she had given him some hope. Then he would have the courage to start easing their pattern of interaction. Moreover, her illness also required exercise and external treatment. Bai Weiwei blinked. Originally, there was no spirit in her eyes that appeared lifeless. It lit up at once. It was as if a flower had bloomed in her eyes. The soft light in her eyes was exceptionally gentle. Xia Hanyang's heart relaxed. He felt that being looked at by her like this. His heart was rubbed into a ball, and it was warm. Xia Hanyang tidied up the table. During this time, the nanny wouldn't stay behind except to cook. Some of the housework was done by himself. He washed the dishes, took the slippers, and threw the clothes into the washing machine. When he did these things, it was very smooth and natural. Wei Wei Bai wanted to do it, but he couldn't bear to. Xia Hanyang threw the orange peel into the trash can. Seeing that she was still looking at him with excitement in her eyes, he smiled. At the bottom to record this reading record. Chapter 1961. He paused for a moment. It was so late at night. With great perseverance, Xia Hanyang resisted the impulse and said, "Go to sleep. By the way, do you need me to run the bath water for you?" Wei Wei Bai didn't notice the faint excitement in his tone. She shook her head and immediately got up from the sofa and walked to the room. "No, see you tomorrow." She would say see you tomorrow for the first time. Xia Hanyang was stunned. Although his body temperature was still so high, he finally suppressed the thought of being worse than a beast. He said in a hoarse voice, see you tomorrow. The door was closed. Xia Hanyang slowly exhaled. Damn, he felt that he was going to become an eminent monk. He used to be able to go out for work, but now they were together day and night. He really wished he could castrate himself. He didn't want to scare her. Xia Hanyang's eyes were like a wolf's. He stared at the door of her room for a long time. Then he finally walked to the guest room where he lived. He took a cold shower. Halfway through the cold shower, there was a sudden thunderstorm outside. The weather forecast said there would be a thunderstorm. But he didn't expect it to be at night. Xia Hanyang's lower body was wrapped in a bath towel. He grabbed a towel and wiped his hair vigorously. His skin was cold. It took a long time for the cold water to cool down. Xia Hanyang walked to the wine cabinet and took out a bottle of liquor. He seldom drank now, but occasionally he couldn't suppress the heat and would drink a few glasses. A few glasses couldn't make him drunk, but it could make him sleep. So that he wouldn't be too energetic in the middle of the night and make trouble. After all, he sat in front of Wei Wei Bai's door at 2 or 3 in the morning and stared at her until dawn. He also felt that he was a pervert. Just as he poured half a glass of liquor, there was a knock on the door. Xia Hanyang stopped pouring the liquor and was a little confused. Then he heard a weak knock on the door. This time, it was not wrong. It was not an illusion. His hand trembled and the liquor almost spilled. Xia Hanyang immediately put down the bottle, rushed to the door in a few steps and opened it at once. Seeing that Wei Wei Bai had turned around and was about to leave, he grabbed her hand. Xia Hanyang hurriedly grabbed her arm and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Why are you knocking on my door?" Wei Wei Bai was pulled by him and staggered. She turned around and her face was pale. Even the little bit of blood on her lips seemed to have been covered in frost, making her look exceptionally spiritless. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before whispering, "I'm fine." She finished speaking and was about to leave. Xia Hanyang had forcefully dragged her into the sect. There was a loud bang outside the window. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. Her pupils constricted and her face turned even paler. Her expression was tense, and for a moment, she was so frightened that she didn't know how to walk. Xia Hanyang didn't notice it at first, but when he saw the excessive fear on her face, his heart sank. What was going on? She was not afraid of thunder. Xia Hanyang keenly saw that her eyes were red. She was so timid but cute. He hurriedly stopped his shameless thoughts. He pressed his hand on her shoulder and whispered softly, afraid that he would scare her, "What's wrong?" "Afraid of thunder." Wei Wei Bai shook her head with difficulty. "It's okay. I'm not afraid." After saying that, the thunder roared again. Wei Wei Bai held Xia Hanyang's arm tightly and almost hid in his arms. Xia Hanyang immediately took a step forward and let her hide in his arms. He looked at the thunderstorm outside the window and became more and more confused. He stroked her hair. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Wei Wei Bai had stopped trembling. She quietly held his arm and lowered her head to let him touch her. She was so obedient. Chapter 1962. Xia Hanyang felt that she was here to tempt him into committing a crime. He pursed his lips, afraid that he would show his fangs and bite her. He quickly changed the topic. "If you're afraid, you won't be afraid after drinking some wine." Wei Wei Bai looked up, and the fear in her eyes did not fade away. She nodded in agreement. A man and a woman alone in the middle of the night. Xia Hanyang admitted that he was up to no good. He casually stuffed half a glass of wine into Wei Wei Bai's hand. "Don't be afraid. I'll drink with you." After saying that, he pulled her to sit on the bed. Then he poured himself a glass of wine and drank it all in one gulp. When he was drinking, he stole a glance at her, which was unbelievably deep. Wei Wei Bai did not notice, but hesitated for a moment. Seeing that he drank so quickly, she thought that the alcohol content was not high. So she lowered her head and drank one sip after another. This kind of strong liquor was particularly mild. But it was famous for its after effects. Many people fell for it easily. However, in less than half a bottle, a man was knocked out. For Xia Hanyang, a former alcoholic, it was impossible for him to drink. But it was easy for him to knock out Wei Wei Bai. So he did not remind her, but drank one glass after another with her. He drank a lot. She slowly drank more than 2 glasses. For a person who did not drink often, she drank too much. Sure enough, her face began to turn red. It was a rosy red, a red color that was rarely seen on her face. Her eyes were misty, which was different from her nearsighted haze. But it was seductive moist, and the corners of her eyes were red, like peach blossoms. Xia Hanyang felt that he was going to turn into a werewolf on a rainy night. He should pity her for being afraid of thunder. But forgive him for thinking about her for so many years. Thinking about it, his head was full of anger, and so was his heart. He wanted to pounce on her whenever she showed a flaw. Even if it was a kiss. He wanted to kiss her, so much that it hurt everywhere. Xia Hanyang's eyes lit up, and he whispered, "Wei Wei, are you still afraid of thunder?" She drank so much wine. If she didn't get drunk, he would take her surname. Wei Wei Bai shook her head and murmured, "I'm going to faint, Xia Hanyang." Xia Hanyang said, "That's good. I'm not afraid of thunder if I faint." Bai Wei Wei stared blankly at him, her face sluggish, her eyes wide open. Suddenly, there was a clatter. Tears gushed out of her eyes. She didn't cry out loud either. She just quietly let the tears flow down her cheeks. He looked so pitiful and desperate. As soon as she cried, Xia Hanyang's werewolf impulse disappeared. He immediately turned into a stuttering little dog. Wei Wei. Wei Wei. Some people would behave strangely when they were drunk. However, he had never seen anyone cry as miserably as Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Instead, her entire body trembled. She bit her lips tightly and cried silently. Another clap of thunder sounded. Wei Wei Bai suddenly threw herself into Xia Hanyang's arms and hugged him tightly. She trembled and said, "I'm scared, Xia Hanyang." Xia Hanyang hurriedly hugged her and reached out to stroke her back. His face suddenly darkened, and his eyes were full of anxiety. "Don't be afraid." She was not afraid of thunder. Why was she suddenly so afraid of thunder? Wei Wei Bai suddenly whispered, "They were struck by lightning." "It's so scary." Xia Hanyang was stunned. "Struck by lightning?" Wei Wei Bai cried silently. Her voice trembled so much that she couldn't form a sentence. They wanted to escape. They were struck by lightning. Xia Hanyang was at a loss for a long time. He didn't understand this sentence at all. Escape? Struck by lightning? It sounded like the plot of a story. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1963. Did she drink too much? Xia Hanyang tried to comfort her. "It's okay. Isn't it someone else who was struck by lightning? Our Wei Wei is so kind and beautiful. Even if I was struck by lightning, it wouldn't strike you." Perhaps she felt that she had abandoned him. She felt guilty. That was why she was so afraid of lightning. One couldn't do anything against their conscience. Once they did something, they were afraid of lightning. Xia Hanyang worked hard for a long time. Finally, the rain outside stopped a little. Wei Wei Bai burped, hung dizzily on his strong arm, and closed her eyes to sleep. Her face was red, and her appearance was indescribably seductive. Xia Hanyang stared at her bitterly for a long time. Then he was sure that she was really asleep. So she came here just to cry and then go to sleep. What about him? He would rather be struck by lightning than suffer this torture. Xia Hanyang put her soft body on the bed and supported her with one hand. In this position, she was completely enveloped by his body. She was unconscious, and her hair was so long that it covered the bed. He had once imagined the way her hair would be long and spread out beneath his body. It would definitely look good. Now he was sure again. She was really beautiful. Xia Hanyang couldn't help but touch her hair for a long time, and then he touched her face. Her eyelashes were closed, and her lips. In the end, Xia Hanyang was still gasping for breath and lay down heavily beside Wei Wei Bai. Then he hugged her. There was a glimmer of light in his eyes, and there was a hint of laziness like a big cat. Then he had time to think about Wei Wei Bai's words. She was afraid of lightning, but it was definitely not because of her school days. Some things happened during the 6 years of her disappearance, which caused her to be traumatized by thunderstorms. Xia Hanyang muttered to himself, lightning killed someone and then escape. His pupils constricted, and he realized what it meant to escape. The place where people escaped was imprisonment. Why would she use this word? Could it be that she was imprisoned by someone? Xia Hanyang's heart sank, and he suppressed this crazy idea. But investigating her life during the past 6 years became the most urgent thing in his heart. Wei Wei Bai woke up with a splitting headache. She missed the run as she wished. The wine was frighteningly strong. She only remembered that in the middle of the night, Xia Hanyang gave her some tea to sober her up. He also forced her to eat some porridge. After all, not eating and drinking too much wine was not good for the body. Bai Weiwei asked the system in a daze, "There were no accidents last night, right?" The system held the knitting needle and nodded, "You said it yourself. It's just that the story of being struck to death by lightning doesn't make sense." Bai Weiwei covered her head. Did she say that people were struck by lightning? Being struck to death by lightning was only one of them. Was. Automatically correct data automatically. Data automatically. Did I also break out? System. No. You were only released for a short time because of your good behavior. So the data update changed to you being held hostage. When you came to the outer iron fence, you saw the escapee being struck by lightning. Otherwise, there was no way to explain how she saw the escapee. After all, the prisoners at night were all locked up. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her temples. She said, "You've worked hard. I have to think of a way to let Xia Hanyang investigate the process himself." // Chapter 1964. If she said it herself, she would not be so touched. The truth that Xia Hanyang found out by himself was enough for him to let her go. It was noon when Wei Wei Bai woke up. The nanny rushed over with hangover soup and a hot towel. The nanny said, "The young master went to work early and asked me to come and take care of you." Wei Wei Bai knew that Xia Hanyang had gone to investigate. After all, during this time, he had pushed away the social engagements outside and spent time at home with her with work. She felt that she was about to be free. Wei Wei Bai was in a good mood when she thought of this and untied the knot in her heart. Nothing had happened in this plane. So she ate an extra bowl of rice. The nanny was grinning from ear to ear. After all, as long as Wei Wei Bai ate and slept well, she was in a good mood. Everything was fine with Xia Hanyang. The Xia family doted on Xia Hanyang and Wei Wei Bai, who could control Xia Hanyang's mood. They also served him with trepidation. Xia Hanyang did not appear for the whole day. Wei Wei Bai was not in a hurry. After all, she just gave Xia Hanyang a general direction. Xia Hanyang might not realize it on the first day. She had been in prison before. Maybe he would investigate for a few more days. It was almost dinner time. The system suddenly threw the sweater in its hand and said seriously, "Host, go to the top floor quickly. The machine has 1 minute of fuel to go back. It will start in 10 minutes. You only have 1 minute." In the spare box of the machine, there was 1 minute of fuel to go back. As long as Wei Wei Bai's soul quickly entered the passage in this 1 minute, he could take her back. "You don't have to wait for a lifetime," the system urged. Wei Wei Bai also got up in an instant and said hurriedly, "What, are you sure?" The system said, "In 10 minutes, the top floor will open. You can just jump down directly." Wei Wei Bai said, "Fuck, why are you in such a hurry for such a good thing?" It was good news that she did not have to stay for a lifetime. Wei Wei Bai saw the nanny enter the kitchen. During this time, the nanny was not on guard against her. After all, she had been so obedient for 2 months. Except for Xia Hanyang, everyone would relax their vigilance. Wei Wei Bai looked at the clothes rack at the door. The nanny's shoulder bag was hanging on it. She got up carefully. She didn't even wear shoes. She crouched down and searched for the key in the shoulder bag. Then, he opened the door and closed it silently. She locked the nanny in the door. Without Xia Hanyang's fingerprints, the door couldn't be opened. Wei Wei Bai rushed to the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. The system also reminded her, "The male lead is coming back." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Where is he?" The system replied, "He's still on the road. It'll take him more than 10 minutes to get back here." Wei Wei Bai nodded. There's still time. When they reached the top floor, the wind was extremely strong. Wei Wei Bai stood barefooted on the edge of the balcony. The system roared, "There are still 3 minutes before it opens. Don't jump now, okay? Otherwise, I'll really become a spirit behind you." Wei Wei Bai grabbed onto the surrounding barbed wire and shouted, "Got it. Remind me when the time is up." The system said, "Okay, I'll go check the time. I'll remind you when it's time." Wei Wei Bai stood on the edge of the balcony, trembling. It was too high and her legs were weak. 3 minutes felt extremely long. Before the time was up, a car suddenly appeared downstairs and drove from afar. The speed was as if it was on a date with the Grim Reaper. Wei Wei Bai took a look. It seemed to be Xia Hanyang's car. The nanny had a cell phone. He knew that she had run away. Wei Wei Bai calculated the distance and time. Damn it! If she jumped, she would either die in front of him or hit his car. Chapter 1965. She didn't know why, but her mind suddenly flashed. The scene of him exploding in the hospital. Bai Weiwei rarely showed emotional fluctuations like an old woman. Because of the blocker, it was almost impossible for her to have any emotional fluctuations towards the people in this world. But she didn't know why. When the car rushed over from afar with all its might and disregard everything else. Suddenly, Xia Hanyang's young face, full of youthful and wanton smiles, flashed in her mind. If she didn't exist, his life wouldn't be so tragic. The current Xia Hanyang had too many tragic scars left behind in his eyes. When he smiled, he was no longer so carefree and wanton. 6 years had left him with indelible pain. Wei Wei Bai frowned a little strangely. Why did she think of this? She had never felt emotional fluctuations before. It was faint, with an almost insignificant strength. It fell lightly into her heart. Just when she and the system didn't notice. The red line on her wrist flashed a golden light and became fuller. The system said, "Okay, it's opened. You have to step into the passage in 1 minute. Jump off the building now." Wei Wei Bai didn't think much and just stepped out with 1 foot. The car just stopped. A battered figure almost fell out of the car. He staggered to his feet and ran as fast as he could into the building. His flying black hair was messed up in the wind. She couldn't see his face clearly, but just by looking at his body, she knew how desperate and painful he was. Wei Wei Bai suddenly couldn't help but think. She would just jump down like this. Her body would definitely fall in front of Xia Hanyang. A strange thought appeared in Wei Wei Bai's mind. The man who saw her jump off the building. He would die. Xia Hanyang would definitely die. Xia Hanyang didn't sleep all night. His mind was full of what she said. He looked at her all night. In the end, he couldn't stand it anymore. He didn't know what she had been through. He left early, ran to the company, and brought out the entire information department. Investigate, he had to find out where she had been for the past 6 years. If she didn't say, could he pretend not to know? He was busy with this for most of the day. However, he was very clear about her information. After she disappeared 6 years ago, she didn't study or go abroad. Also, she had taken away 10 million yuan, but there was no woman with a lot of money who suddenly appeared. 10 million was neither too much nor too little. For an ordinary person, buying a house would leave traces behind. Only Wei Wei Bai did not leave any trace behind. Xia Hanyang suddenly thought of the news of Wei Wei Bai being struck by lightning. He frowned and ordered someone to check the news. Being struck to death by lightning was definitely news. After all, it was considered a rare and novel way to die. With great difficulty, he finally found a very inconspicuous piece of news in an old newspaper from 3 years ago. It was a prison. 5 prisoners escaped from the prison, taking advantage of the thunderstorm to escape. To successfully escape, they even held hostage a prisoner who was usually bullied by them. He threatened the prison guards. Just as they were about to kill and escape, thunderstorm's lightning just happened to fall on the outer barbed wire fence. One of the 3 prisoners who had already climbed up the barbed wire was killed on the spot. 2 of them were seriously injured. The other 2 hostage-takers were restrained by the prison guards. The hostage-taker was very calm and even held the other prisoners back. In addition, he usually behaved well in prison. He had a chance to get a reduced sentence. When Xia Hanyang first saw this news, he didn't feel anything. Fast. Chapter 1966. He didn't even mention Wei Wei Bai at all. After all, how could his Wei Wei go to jail? What was prison? He knew. Not to mention a girl, even those criminals who were full of evil would go to jail. They were all afraid. Xia Hanyang found that his fingers holding the newspaper were trembling. He took a deep breath. He hadn't found out yet. It wasn't necessarily Wei Wei Bai. No, it wasn't her. Xia Hanyang searched for this piece of news and found nothing but this. He hesitated for a long time and was about to order someone to investigate this news when his phone rang. It was Third Master Xia. After he found Wei Wei Bai, he had been guarding against old Master Xia. 6 years ago, if he hadn't come out to make trouble, Wei Wei Bai wouldn't have left him. Maybe old Master Xia wouldn't have covered up the news when she left for a month. He wouldn't have looked in the wrong direction and lost her completely. He was still resentful about this. Xia Hanyang answered the phone and was about to say that he was busy. But old Master Xia said in a deep voice, "Come here. I have something to tell you." Xia Hanyang said, "Grandpa, I'm very busy." Old Master Xia was silent for a while and sighed, "It's about Wei Wei Bai." Xia Hanyang immediately got up, picked up his coat with one hand and walked out. "What happened to her?" Old Master Xia hesitated for a few seconds and said, "She has been in prison for the past 6 years." Xia Hanyang was almost unprepared. This sentence broke the expression on his face. He stood there blankly. He didn't know how much time had passed before he heard his own voice tremble from the cold. "I'll come to your place right away. Give me the information." After that, he hung up the phone and couldn't wait to throw it out. He was afraid that she would call him and ask why he didn't take her out for a run. So at the last second, he put the phone back in his pocket. Then he kicked the chair in front of him and hurried back to the old house. When Xia Hanyang arrived, old Master Xia gave him the information. He pressed Xia Hanyang's hand and seemed to have aged a few years. In the end, Xia-san couldn't help but sigh, she's a good child. Treat her well. Hearing this, Xia Hanyang couldn't help but feel bitterly disappointed. What kind of treatment did Wei Wei Bai receive that even the cold-hearted old master Xia would sympathize with her? Xia Hanyang didn't know how much courage he had. She flipped through the files of the 6 years she had spent in prison. She turned herself in. He had clearly helped her keep the murder a secret. However, after the college entrance exam, she seemed to have fulfilled her wish. She abandoned him and turned herself in. She had returned to her hometown to turn herself in. Because of her good behavior, the local court's verdict was closed during the trial. Therefore, there was no news, and no information was leaked. When they were researching, they had never thought about this. Xia Hanyang even forgot how that beast of a stepfather had died. After all, this wasn't a big deal to him. No one thought that Wei Wei Bai would give up such a good future to go to jail. No wonder he couldn't find out where she went. Xia Hanyang's fingers hurt as he flipped through the documents, as if needles were pricking his fingernails. How could his Wei Wei go to such a place? She was too obedient and too arrogant. If she went to such a place, she would have no relatives outside and no one would help her. She would be bullied to death. Xia Hanyang's eyes were red, and his expression was extremely violent. She was too good, so she was bullied. Chapter 1967. They beat her and insulted her. He couldn't imagine how such a disgusting word as bitch and vixen could be related to Wei Wei Bai. And she had suffered countless such physical violence for so many years. Xia Hanyang's expression was very scary. He gritted his teeth so hard that blood overflowed. The old Chinese medicine doctor beside Master Xia looked at him. He was furious. He immediately came over and grabbed Xia Hanyang's jaw, forcing him to loosen his teeth for fear that he would break his gums. Xia Hanyang pushed the old Chinese medicine doctor away and loosened his teeth, saying, I want them to die. Master Xia frowned. Calm down, Yang Yang. Xia Hanyang roared, how can I calm down? How can I calm down? Why didn't I think of this? Why didn't I find her earlier? I'm a fucking waste. I threw her into prison for 6 years. What did 6 years mean? It was the most beautiful youth and the best years. It was all wasted. Xia Hanyang clutched the documents, his eyes bloodshot with anger and pain. I threw her into such a place, and I resented her for 6 years. He held his sweetheart in the palm of his hand. He wished he could kneel down and put on her shoes and tie her shoelaces for her. She dug out the softest piece of flesh from the tip of his heart. He wished he could die, but he couldn't bear to hurt her. But she was pressed into the mud, abused and bullied for 6 years. No wonder she was afraid of thunder. She was the one who was bullied and held hostage. If she hadn't dealt with it calmly, she would have died. If it hadn't been for the thunderstorm, he would have only seen her grave. Xia Hanyang accumulated 6 years of anger, pain, despair and violence in his heart. He exploded. He smashed the living room of the old house. He almost hysterically scolded himself. Why didn't I think of this? Why didn't I think of this? He deserved it when she left him 6 years ago. If he had found out earlier that she blamed herself and was afraid. If he had found out earlier that the terrible shadow of her stepfather's death hadn't disappeared. Then she wouldn't have left so easily. No wonder she had always been indifferent to him. Because she had already decided to leave him after the college entrance examination. Xia Hanyang could hardly imagine how scared she was when she turned herself in alone. However, he didn't feel the slightest bit of her feelings. 6 years later, he met her who had just been released from prison. She even wanted to kill him. Of course, she had nothing. She could only wear the school uniform. Because she had been cut off from the world for 6 years, how could she have anything? Xia Hanyang thought of her depression during this time and how she kept saying that she was not worth it. All his doubts were suddenly cleared. She had been tortured for 6 years, and her arrogance was gone. There was only misery and pain all over his body. Of course, she was afraid of thunder because she had almost died in a thunderstorm. He had even seen others die from lightning strikes with his own eyes. Old Master Xia looked a little sad, but he let Xia Hanyang vent. When Xia Hanyang finally calmed down, Master Xia finally took out a book. The book had been around for a long time, and it was slightly yellowed due to lack of maintenance. Do you still remember when I gave her 10 million yuan back then? Xia Hanyang looked at the book in a daze. But when the old man flipped through the pages, he saw 3 checks. This is, Old Master Xia said, because you found her. I wondered why she didn't cash the checks back then and went to investigate. T. Chapter 1968. Xia Hanyang looked at the book and suddenly remembered something. This was the book that Wei Wei Bai often took back then. It was for reviewing physics. She reviewed for him, afraid that he wouldn't understand. She had always been taking notes. And this book was also one of the books that she took notes on. Old Master said, you sealed that room, but the books inside were not touched. I went to look at the surveillance video again and found that she put the check in the book. I went to look for it and found it. It wasn't that they didn't see her putting the check in the book. But no one thought that there were so many checks. Wei Wei Bai didn't take the book with her at all. Instead, she put the book on the bookshelf. So in the beginning, they all looked in the wrong direction. So they couldn't find her. Because of a freak combination of factors, the two of them missed 6 years. Xia Hanyang looked at the 3 checks and the book with her handwriting on it. Finally, he said in a hoarse voice, so back then, she didn't leave because of money or because she didn't like me? Old Master Xia looked at his grandson, and his eyes suddenly became a little wet. That's why I said that she was a good child. A good child who never intended to avoid responsibility. She made a mistake. Even if it was because she encountered something unfair, she had to fight back. Wei Wei Bai also took this mistake and finished the college entrance examination. Then she turned herself in. Even under that kind of situation, she still tutored this disappointing grandson of hers to make him better. Xia Hanyang's talent in business in recent years was not because Wei Wei Bai had sorted out the learning methods for him. The reason why he went further. Old Master Xia felt that he was really old. Back then, if he had helped Wei Wei Bai instead of driving her away, maybe she wouldn't have left so quickly, or showed a sign of turning herself in. In that case, she wouldn't have had to endure such a painful 6 years alone. If she didn't intend to avoid responsibility in the beginning, then even if she liked Xia Hanyang, she couldn't show it. Xia Hanyang's strength was gone. He crouched down and buried his head in his knees in the messy living room. Like a child who hadn't grown up yet, he was trembling all over. He said, "Grandfather, I hate myself." What kind of bullying did she suffer? What kind of bullying did she suffer to make her feel so inferior and pitiful? I love her, but I hate myself. Xia Hanyang squatted there with tears streaming down his face. Old Master Xia looked at him for a long time and suddenly reached out to pat him on the shoulder. Then go back and accompany her. Accompany her through this most difficult time. As a man, you should also take responsibility. Just like Bai Weiwei, for the sake of her own mistakes, she paid 6 years to take responsibility. Such a girl. It was Xia Hanyang who didn't deserve her. Xia Hanyang wiped his tears and stood up. I'm going back. He would go back to her. Old Master Xia said, go ahead. Bring her back when you're free and call me Grandpa. Without hesitation, Xia Hanyang ran out. He had never run so fast before. He was desperate to return to her side. His phone rang, but he ignored it. He drove to the building and ran desperately up the stairs. Even the elevator was too slow for him. When he reached the door of the house, he panted and reached out to open the door. He, who was in a sorry state, forced a smile that was unpleasant to look at. Wei Wei, I'm back. But only the nanny was in the living room. The nanny was holding the phone anxiously. And the phone in his pocket kept ringing. Xia Hanyang didn't answer the phone at all. When the nanny saw him, she immediately said, "Young master, Miss is missing." Xia Hanyang's mind went blank with a bang. Chapter 1969. The nanny was a little scared when she saw Xia Hanyang's face. She hurriedly said, "Just now, she took my keys and suddenly rushed out. She even locked the door." Xia Hanyang looked at the living room blankly and then stepped back. She ran away again. Just like 6 years ago, he opened the door with joy. But suddenly found that she was gone. That feeling of emptiness from being struck by despair destroyed his entire life. Xia Hanyang retreated to the door and slammed it after he went out. He leaned against the door and forced himself to calm down. She couldn't have run far. He was no longer as young as he was 6 years ago. He was sure that he could find her. He wanted to find her and tell her that he knew he was wrong. It wasn't that she left him. It was that he lost her. Xia Hanyang's mind was full of plans to find her, but he couldn't move. He leaned against the door and his brain was still buzzing. His face had never been so pale, which made him look extremely haggard. His fingers trembled as he ran them through his hair. It seemed that only this kind of meaningless action could calm him down. But the scene of her leaving reminded him of the desperate nightmare 6 years ago. Xia Hanyang stared at the stairs in a daze. It seemed that she would come back in the next moment. After a long time, he suddenly woke up and immediately went to get his phone. He finally had the strength to move and look for her. But his movements were too hasty. His hand trembled, and the phone slipped out and was thrown more than a meter away by him. Xia Hanyang quickly lowered his head to get it. But he heard the sound of the elevator door opening. He didn't think much about it. He just picked up his phone and dialed his assistant's number. "Get over here." "Looking for her?" "Who are you looking for?" "Who else can it be?" "My wife." He spoke so hurriedly that his lips were cut by his teeth. Suddenly, he paused. A pair of feet without shoes came to him. The toes under the ankles were stained with dust. But the ankles were delicate and fragile like thin and brittle jade. Xia Hanyang still lowered his head. He didn't change his posture of holding the phone. His assistant kept asking him questions. But he couldn't hear a word. Suddenly, a voice like the sound of nature sounded. "Xia Hanyang, are you looking for someone?" Xia Hanyang slowly raised his eyes. The bright lights in the corridor suddenly shone brightly in his eyes. Wei Wei Bai was dressed in home clothes. She seemed to have walked a long way barefooted before finally returning to his side. Her eyes were calm and bright, and that wisp of mist was as clean as the morning dew. She seemed to think that he looked very silly. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but smile. His eyebrows were relaxed, and there was a hint of relaxed vitality. Xia Hanyang loosened his fingers and the phone fell to the ground, cracking the screen. He took a few steps forward and opened his arms to embrace her. Time suddenly came to a halt. It was as if the world had stopped moving at this moment. Xia Hanyang's eyes were red as he whispered, "You're back, Wei Wei." This sentence passed through 6 years. He finally said it. 6 years ago, when he opened the door, he did not see her. He shouted, "Wei Wei, I'm back." But she left. Wei Wei Bai's fingers seemed to be hesitant, but in the end, they fell on his back and hugged him. Then her voice was gentle and calm, "Yes, Xia Hanyang." The system asked, "Why don't you return to reality?" Wei Wei Bai was bending over to put on her sneakers. Xia Hanyang wanted to take her to exercise. When she heard the system's words, she paused and tied her shoelaces wrongly. The // to make it easier for you to read next time, you can click the button, the. Chapter 1970. Xia Hanyang, who was holding a bag of badminton rackets, had just walked into the living room. Seeing her actions, he immediately said, "Let me do it." Then he put down the things temporarily, bent down on one knee, reached out to pick up her messy shoelaces, tidied them up and tied a beautiful bow. Wei Weibai looked at Xia Hanyang's spinning hair and couldn't help but respond to the system. Maybe this plane is so relaxing that it's like a vacation. A vacation is never too long. What she didn't say was. At that time, standing on the roof, she thought of her body falling down. After Xia Hanyang saw it with his own eyes, he couldn't live. She didn't know why she couldn't step out. At that time, she thought that if he entered the building, he would return to reality before the time was up. But at the last moment when he ran into the building, she only hesitated for 3 seconds. The passage was closed. This was the first time that Bai Weiwei had hesitated for the sake of a plane partner. She looked at Xia Hanyang deeply. Xia Hanyang had already tied his shoelaces. He looked up and said with a smile, "Okay, let's go." Wei Weibai still didn't feel anything in her heart. She was puzzled as to why she was hesitating. It dissipated. Maybe this plane was really like a vacation, so she didn't reject it. After convincing her Wei Weibai, she happily followed Xia Hanyang to exercise. But the system silently put down the sweater, then rolled up its sleeves, pulled out the tool and came to the shield. It checked the shield carefully with a cold face. There were no gaps. All the places that should be fixed were fixed. And a machine to destroy feelings was added. So even if a lot of Wei Weibai's feelings were hidden in the shield, it was not as excited as it was in the previous planes. There was a danger of cracks in the shield. Then why did Wei Weibai suddenly sympathize with Xia Hanyang? This was simply unreasonable. The system felt that it seemed to have overlooked something. It should have blocked all feelings. It couldn't see any fault, so it had to strengthen the shield. Then it continued to knit. Maybe the host really wanted a vacation. The host in this plane was really living a relaxed and happy life. Xia Hanyang treated her like a little princess. Wei Weibai was not in good health, so Xia Hanyang personally cooked the medicinal soup. The old Chinese doctor gave him a prescription to soak his feet. Xia Hanyang didn't miss a single day. He boiled the medicinal water and gently washed her feet. Sometimes, when Wei Weibai wanted to do something, Xia Hanyang's face darkened. In his eyes, Wei Weibai, who was in poor health, looked like she couldn't even walk 2 steps. Xia San even personally came to apologize to Wei Weibai. Wei Weibai did not dare to accept it. Xia Hanyang said with a cold face, "He deserves it." What kind of grandson is this? A debt collector? Or an unworthy descendant? After that, the two of them got married. A lively wedding was held without a hitch. When Xia Hanyang proposed a toast at his wedding, he invited more than 100 people, including his childhood friend. He drank from everyone he saw. He toasted everyone he saw. In the end, if his sidekick hadn't whispered, "Brother Xia, are you going to lie flat on your wedding night?" Xia Hanyang estimated that he would have drunk with people for 3 days and 3 nights. Then on the wedding night, the system indicated that it was blocked for a day and a night. Facing the civilized, rich and powerful bullet screen, he knitted 2 hats and a pair of socks with no expression on his face. He also ate a bag of small biscuits. Their married life was blissful. But they didn't have children. At first, Xia Hanyang thought about going for a physical checkup or a test tube. Later, the old Chinese doctor said that Wei Weibai was in poor health and it might be dangerous for her to have children. Xia Hanyang immediately dismissed the idea. Not having children could not be an obstacle to them. For Xia Hanyang, he saw Wei Weibai beside him every day when he woke up. He wouldn't trade with the whole world. Later, he took her to travel around the world. Later, When they stopped traveling, Xia Hanyang followed Wei Wei Bai to learn how to play chess, read books, fish, and grow flowers. For such a hot-tempered person like him, it was incredible that he could do these things carefully. But every time she was with her, he was so happy that he could do anything. Many years later, Wei Wei Bai walked slowly because her shoelaces were loose. Xia Hanyang gently bent his knees and joked, "I'm old. I can't tie your shoelaces for you." Bai Weiwei lifted his chin and smiled, the light in her eyes like stars filling the sky. "How are you old? You're still as handsome as ever." Xia Hanyang couldn't help but smile, his eyes gentle and hot. Just like when they first met, he was young and unscathed. Chapter 1971. The system carried Wei Wei Bai's soul, who had successfully retreated, and carefully avoided the space-time storm. Then it flew to the entrance of reality. It didn't dare to continue walking. The red line on Wei Wei Bai's body was frighteningly obvious. The golden light was faintly flowing, with a strange and deep power. His flames couldn't break it. This power made the system feel uncomfortable, maybe it had the meaning of evil imprisonment. So it felt that the golden power on the red line was very dangerous. The system carried Wei Wei Bai's soul in circles, but it couldn't keep it from returning to reality. Although he weakened Wei Wei Bai's memory of the plane, and she was tired from living in the plane for a long time. But her state would still be very tired. This kind of tiredness couldn't be changed. The system paused for a while, and suddenly took out a wool doll. This wool was the magic wool produced by the wool factory. After he handed in the sweater hat, there was a little left, so he casually weaved a wool doll according to Wei Wei Bai's appearance. He originally wanted to decorate it nicely as a souvenir. The magic on this wool doll could be stained with the aura of longing. When he was weaving the doll, he was thinking of Wei Wei Bai. Then this doll would be stained with a lot of Wei Wei Bai's aura. The system weighed the doll, and its eyes hardened. It could only try. He hugged Bai Weiwei's soul and reinforced the two flame chains while he was at it. He was afraid that the soul would accidentally leave his palm. The system silently gathered power, and then rushed to the entrance of reality like an explosion. At the edge of the black and gold, a huge power appeared. The system threw the doll at the golden edge. The power at the sea of blood and the mountain of bones suddenly stopped. It seemed to be attracted by something. The power on the red line loosened, and this small pause. The system seized the opportunity, and he rushed into the door of reality and disappeared. The door of reality closed, isolating the power of the red line. In the endless darkness, a hand appeared, cutting through the darkness. The elegant white jade-like joints, the flawless back of the hand, with a kind of power that could break the sky and open the earth. Pushing through the darkness. Suddenly, the strength of his fingers became lighter. The lonely doll lay on the border of darkness. He touched it with his fingertips and then gently picked it up. A doll suddenly appeared in the palm of the man sitting on the bone throne. The doll was very delicate. It was made of knitted wool and had a small flower on its head. A faint magic power surrounded the doll. There was a familiar aura around the magic power. Was it that soul? The man whose eyes were half closed and completely indifferent moved his eyelashes slightly. A ripple appeared in the golden eyes. Then, he closed his eyes again and gently bent his fingers to let the doll lie in his palm. It was doll's aura. It was very comfortable. The system was cursing in its heart. At least it managed to fool him for once. But in her heart, she was cursing Yi Yuxuan. He had already told her not to tie a red string around Wei Wei Bai. Was he deaf? He had caused the death of Wei Wei Bai. He was going to make Yi Yuxuan pay with his life. That lunatic. He hadn't collected all the emotional fragments yet. He couldn't wait to reveal his sick, dark, and paranoid side. Although he knew that people like Yi Yuxuan were born strong and had heaven-defying luck, they were destined to be the protagonists. But their flaws were also very obvious. In this kind of person's personality, their actions were stronger than anyone else's. They were also much more possessive and paranoid than ordinary people. Chapter 1972. As a result, once you want to fight for something, you will fight to the death. The system scolded Yi Yuxuan while carefully looking around and found that Yi Yuxuan was asleep. He immediately put Wei Wei Bai's soul back. Then he retracted back into the trash can to hide. The last time he was forced to meet Yi Yuxuan, he had a sense of crisis. So he would not meet him if he could. Yi Yuxuan, who was sleeping, seemed to notice something. His eyelashes trembled, and his fingers could not help but bend, as if he was holding something. But there was only air in his palm. He finally opened his eyes and looked at the white ceiling of the hospital. Qin Xiu, who was next to him, threw away the medical record and finally breathed a sigh of relief. You finally passed the critical period. Yi Yuxuan gently put his finger to his thin lips, and there was a trace of displeasure in his dark and calm eyes. This action signaled Qin Xiu not to speak too loudly. Qin Xiu's mouth trembled, and he immediately glanced at Wei Wei Bai. Today was the third day. So Wei Wei Bai was likely to wake up. Yi Yuxuan was afraid of waking her up. Yi Yuxuan calmly lowered his voice and said, "Push the wheelchair, I want to take her home." He was hospitalized for the past 3 days. But even if he was hospitalized, he had to put an extra bed in the ward and personally watch over Wei Wei Bai. Qin Xiu knew what he meant. He still couldn't help but jump. "I won't tell your darling that you had food poisoning and almost died, but next time you must not eat Wei Wei's food." It was like being struck by lightning. What happened 3 days ago was still vivid in his mind. If it weren't for Qin Xiu, early the next morning, he would have gone to see Wei Wei Bai's physical condition. Yi Yuxuan could have been directly poisoned to death. Although it was an exaggeration, when he opened the door. Seeing Yi Yuxuan lying in front of the table, in a coma with a livid face, he was scared out of his wits. Later, he checked and found that Wei Wei Bai's pudding contained some strange things such as bleach powder. Wait, why would there be bleach powder in the pudding, something that could poison people? After dragging Yi Yuxuan to the hospital to wash his stomach. When Qin Xiu went back to get Yi Yuxuan's clothes, he checked the kitchen. The bleach powder was placed in an inconspicuous corner by the nanny when she was cleaning the stains on the kitchen floor. Because it was relatively small, it was placed in an empty bottle without a label. So, Wei Wei Bai may have added it to the pudding. At that moment, Qin Xiu felt that in the future, whoever let Bai Wei Wei go into the kitchen alone might die. No one could guarantee that they wouldn't have detergent, stain remover, and the like in their kitchen. In Bai Wei Wei's eyes, these things might not be cleaned. But the seasoning, hee. What was even more strange was how Yi Yuxuan ate so much pudding. Wei Wei Bai made a lot of pudding. Yi Yuxuan ate them one by one, just like that. After washing his stomach, Qin Xiu couldn't help but ask him, "Damn, the taste of that pudding must be terrible. You ate one and you knew you were going to be poisoned. Why did you continue to eat?" Yi Yuxuan's face was pale, but his tone was very calm. "Wei Wei made it for me. Although the taste is a bit lacking, it's actually not bad." "Not bad your head. Eating one may not be a problem." But knowing that these things can poison people, he still ate them all. Yi Yuxuan's brain was corroded by the bleach powder. Read the full text. Download the full text. Read the full text. Collection, below to record the reading record. Chapter 1973. Qin Xiu pushed the wheelchair and said with an ugly expression, "Next time, you must not let Wei Wei Bai into the kitchen. You must not. Her culinary skills were so bad that it could kill." He thought it was an exaggeration. But Wei Wei Bai could turn this sentence into reality. Yi Yuxuan acted as if he didn't hear it. He tried to get out of bed and then expressionlessly changed into a hospital gown. His body was still weak. However, no one could see his wretched side. He had just taken off his shirt, revealing his beautifully muscled back. Wei Wei Bai frowned and suddenly opened her eyes. She was at a loss for a moment and saw Yi Yuxuan's back from the corner of her eyes. She was silent for a moment, but saw that Yi Yuxuan seemed to have sensed something and turned his head. Yi Yuxuan immediately grabbed his clothes and put them on. Then he walked to the bed, bowed his head and pressed her temples. "Does your head still hurt?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes were still blank and tired. Then she slowly reacted, "Yi Yuxuan." Yi Yuxuan smiled. "Do you still remember what you promised me last time?" Wei Wei Bai, what did I promise him? The last time it was for Yi Yuxuan was 3 days. For her, it was a span of decades. Wei Wei Bai thought for a while and then said uncertainly, "Are you okay?" It seemed that last time they said that when she woke up, the first thing she had to ask was if he was okay. She didn't ask her father or anyone else if they were okay. Yi Yuxuan's pale face softened. "I'm fine, Wei Wei." He had a sweet dream. He was very good. That dream made him fascinated and addicted. He had never felt so good. Qin Xiu put his hands on the wheelchair and couldn't help but roll his eyes at this adulterous couple. What a good idea. Were they so good that they were going to the hospital together? Wei Wei Bai also noticed that the place was not right. This is the hospital. Has my health deteriorated again? Yi Yuxuan shook her head and said calmly, "It's nothing. I just came to the hospital to give you a routine body checkup. Everything is fine. I even pushed the wheelchair here. I plan to take you home." Wei Wei Bai stared at Yi Yuxuan's face. His expression was calm, as if he was speaking the truth. However, his complexion was even worse than hers. Wei Wei Bai's eyes moved to Qin Xiu. "Is he sick?" Yi Yuxuan maintained a perfect expression. But her face couldn't lie. She went to the hospital every day, so she knew that Yi Yuxuan was sick. Qin Xiu helplessly said, "Food poisoning." Yi Yuxuan's eyes immediately turned ruthless as he stared at Qin Xiu. His stare made Qin Xiu's back feel cold. But his medical ethics made him risk his life and say, "It was eating pudding. She had gastric lavage." This could even be reported on the news. And it was the kind of news that would last 100 years. No one would believe him even if he went outside to complain. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a long time. Eating pudding, distant memories came back little by little. She finally remembered the strawberry pudding she made for Yi Yuxuan. Was it a joke to have gastric lavage? How could it be? Wei Wei Bai didn't believe it and said, "It was poisoned." It must be his opponent who could make Yi Yuxuan so serious that he had gastric lavage. Only someone who poisoned his food could make it so serious. "Qin Xiu, was it poisoned by you?" Yi Yuxuan nodded. "Well, it's possible." Qin Xiu looked at Yi Yuxuan in disbelief. He spoiled Wei Wei Bai so much that he didn't need gastric lavage next time. Just poison her to death. Wei Wei Bai finally woke up. She got up and reached out to touch Yi Yuxuan's hand. It was cold. His blood was hot. Although his expression was cold, his body was warm. Collection, below to record the reading record. Chapter 1974. Unless the body is very weak, it is possible for the hands and feet to be so cold. Wei Wei Bai didn't look at Yi Yuxuan and looked directly at Qin Xiu. "Can he be discharged?" Qin Xiu shook his head. "It's safer to stay a few more days. It's not like we can't afford it. Anyway, Wei Wei Bai also knows, Yi Yuxuan doesn't need to be in a hurry to leave the hospital." Yi Yuxuan walked slowly to the wheelchair, squeezed Qin Xiu away, and then put the wheelchair beside the bed. "There is no big problem with my body." He bent down, intending to pick up Wei Wei Bai and put her in the wheelchair. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her hand and pressed down on his fingers. "Yi Yuxuan, listen to the doctor and stay in the hospital." "How old is he? How can he be so willful to leave the hospital?" Yi Yuxuan looked at her wrist. Then he stretched out his hand, and a red line appeared on his wrist. A faint doubt appeared in his heart, the red line didn't break? Wei Weibai took the opportunity to hold his wrist, and gave Qin Xiu a look, asking him to hold Yi Yuxuan. Qin Xiu's face, where did I come from, where did I go? I don't know anyone. Who dares to hold Yi Yuxuan? Only Wei Weibai dares. Wei Weibai saw that her doctor was completely unreliable, and could only repeat, if you are not well, don't be in a hurry to leave the hospital. Yi Yuxuan's expression was very calm, but his eyes were always on their wrists. 3 days ago, when the red line dissipated, he saw it with his own eyes. These days, he did notice a red shadow on his wrist. But he thought it was because the red line was not completely broken last time. That blind man said that once the red line was broken, it was difficult to connect. Why did it connect automatically again? That thing said that the red line would kill Wei Weibai. Whether it was true or not, he couldn't let Wei Weibai take any risks. Yi Yuxuan stared at the red line, pursed his lips, and stretched out his other hand to touch the red line. As a result, her fingers loosened on his wrist. Then, 2 soft palms cupped his face, forcibly lifting his absent-minded face. Yi Yuxuan looked up and saw her, a pair of black eyes, staring at him. Without myopia, her eyes were particularly bright and clear. More beautiful than a spring. Yi Yuxuan remembered that she didn't like wearing glasses. So in the dream, even if she was always myopic, she rarely wore glasses. Instead, she often gently looked at him. Calm was Yi Yuxiang. Her appearance had always been very vague in his dreams, but he remembered her eyes very clearly. Bai Weiwei looked into Yi Yuxuan's eyes. Was he in a daze? Calm. Wei Weibai stared at his dull eyes and whispered, is it okay to stay in the hospital? Don't make me worry. Yi Yuxuan's eyes became sober, and then he slowly said, yes. Qin Xiu was on the side, arms crossed, looking at Yi Yuxuan hopelessly. He guessed that Wei Weibai would say that the moon in the sky was so beautiful. Yi Yuxuan's mind would come up with a plan on how to smash the moon down. Thinking of this, he felt extremely cold. People who fall in love are all angels whose brains have been soaked in water. No one is normal. Wei Weibai breathed a sigh of relief, released his face, and was about to get out of bed. The door of the ward suddenly opened. A young bald man wearing small round sunglasses came in with a calm face. Oh, you're all here. Yi Yuxuan's eyes were cold, looking at the man. It was the fortune teller Ah Shi. Ah Shi showed a flattering smile in the direction of Yi Yuxuan. It's like this, Mr. Yi, these days I observed the sky at night and found that the red Luan star was abnormal, so I reopened the red Luan array and connected the broken marriage. Ah Shi didn't know that it could actually succeed. He saw that the red line was broken and worried that the quality was too bad. He was afraid that Yi Yuxuan would come to his door to argue, so he tried to connect it, and it succeeded. It was thicker, bigger, and stronger. So awesome that he quickly came to his door to show off. Without waiting for Yi Yuxuan to say anything, she had accurately walked to the front of the bed. He smiled warmly at Wei Weibai and said, the two of you are really a match made in heaven. At first glance, I can see that you are fated for 9 lives. Yi Yuxuan, only 9 lives? This was cursing him. He and Wei Weibai, more than 9 lives. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu.com. Chapter 1975. She paused for a moment and corrected, Wancher. The speed at which he observed people's thoughts and body language was simply incomparable. Yi Yuxuan's face was not very good. After all, he had just climbed out of bed. There were too many people in the ward. Wei Wei Bai had just woken up, and her tiredness had not yet faded. She saw the blind fortune teller and Yi Yuxuan. Her expression was strangely peaceful, which was a rare sight. Yi Yuxuan was still with the fortune teller. It seemed like the last time he took her to a fortune teller. Then did the fortune teller have after-sales service? No, maybe Yi Yuxuan was too rich. So this fortune teller was thick-skinned enough to contact him. Seemingly aware that Wei Wei Bai's eyes were not right, Yi Yuxuan looked back at her. Wei Wei Bai felt that his eyes were very deep and hesitant. Could it be that Yi Yuxuan wanted to do another fortune-telling? And what was the red string rupture? This was because several planes were equivalent to a lifetime. Her memories of reality were somewhat mixed up. There were a lot of fragmented memories that she could not remember. It seemed that when Yi Yuxuan took her to a fortune teller, he did mention the red string rupture. Maybe it was because her face was full of doubt. Yi Yuxuan moved his fingers and whispered, "Nothing, I'll go out for a while." After that, he got up and walked to Shi, grabbed his collar with one hand and dragged him away. That strength did not show that he was sick. Wei Wei Bai calmly watched them go out, and then without hesitation, she put on her shoes and followed them. Sneaking around, it's not related to me, is it? Qin Qiu immediately said, Xian's body is not good now, he needs to rest, please drag him back. A disobedient patient gave Qin Qiu a headache. And Wei Wei Bai's physical condition was better every time she woke up. He was happy to throw the hard work to her. Wei Wei Bai smiled and suddenly asked, did he really eat pudding and get gastric lavage? Qin Qiu was about to write something on the medical record, but when he heard this, he immediately opened Yi Yuxuan's and handed it to Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai took a look, it was really food poisoning. That food was really her pudding. Wei Wei Bai silently wiped her sweat. In the future, she should go to the kitchen less. What if a family bucket accidentally appeared, and the whole family ate the food she cooked and died together? After Wei Wei Bai went out, she saw nurses, doctors, and patients. Only, Yi Yuxuan and that Shi's range. Bai Weiwei called the system, Tongzi, where did Yi Yuxuan go? System. Bai Weiwei, wasn't Yi Yuxuan not here? Why didn't he say anything? The system was not silent, it was unable to speak. Shi and Yi Yuxuan went to the rooftop. Yi Yuxuan went straight to the point. There was a thing that said that the red string I tied her with would kill her, so it's better to break the red string. She frowned and pinched his fingers to calculate. Calculate, he couldn't calculate. Yi Yuxuan's fate couldn't be calculated. He had to barely calculate Wei Wei Bai's fate. Calculate, he barely calculated a little. It was almost the same as not calculating. Such a fat sheep, he couldn't even calculate a hair. It was a disgrace to the ancestors. She said, this breaking of the red string will hurt the harmony between heaven and earth, and your fate will also be broken. In the future, if you don't get along well, you will be like strangers. Yi Yuxuan's face was pale, so pale that it had a trace of sickly fragility. He whispered, in the past, when there was no red string, didn't we go through the same thing? She shook his head. It's not the same. Forcefully tying the red string of fate is already connecting the two of you to each other. This stolen fate must be cherished. Once the red string of fate is not connected, then the fate between the two of you will be lost more than ever. Chapter 1976. This was also the reason why he saw the red string break. The reason why his eyebrows jumped so many times. In less than a few days, the red string broke. Wasn't this a slap to his face as the number one fortune teller? The second time he forcefully connected their red strings, there was a high probability of failure. But Yi Yuxuan's fate was too precious. If one was involved with his fate, everything would go smoothly. So she actually used Yi Yuxuan's life to successfully connect the red string again. too forceful gathering of fate. If it broke again, the fate would flow crazily. Yi Yuxuan and Wei Wei Bai's love path would also be unusually bumpy. And the two of them were originally destined to be alone in the world. One was so precious that no one could get close to him. The other was so unlucky that he didn't have a chance at all. It was already very difficult to tie the two of them together. If it broke again, she felt that the two of them would never have a chance to be together in the future. She thought about it and finally couldn't help but ask, the person who said that he would harm Miss Bai's life, may I ask if he said it out of jealousy because he admires you or Miss Bai? Yi Yuxuan looked up faintly, his eyes were tinged with light. It was exceptionally stunning. His voice was steady and deep, with a strange kind of darkness. Jealousy? Then after thinking for a moment, Yi Yuxuan suddenly looked up and said with a frown, then drag him down and ask him. Drag him down and ask him? Yi Yuxuan's eyes looked through the void at the golden place. He had always been able to see the golden light above Wei Wei Bai's head. And Wei Wei Bai, like everyone else, couldn't see that golden thing. The golden powder was like goose feather snow, but also like golden rain. It floated down into the sky. And he saw that on the golden powder was a round machine-like thing, just a corner of it. Because that golden machine was like a clock that was so huge that he couldn't see the whole picture clearly. There were all kinds of terrifyingly complex structures on it. The golden patterns emitted a radiance as bright as the sun. As long as Wei Wei Bai's soul returned, this thing would appear. Especially when Wei Wei Bai's soul entered his body. This golden round object was even clearer than the others. Yi Yuxuan had a strong premonition when he saw the golden light. He felt that he could touch it. Therefore, he finally raised his hand for the first time, and the golden specks of light twined around his fingers. Those dots of light turned into lines, and countless lines wrapped around his fingertips. Blind sensed something and immediately closed his eyes that could no longer see the world. However, it was still unable to stop the erosion of the golden light. When Yi Yuxuan touched the light, she saw what she wanted to see. That hidden thing that was neither male nor female. Yi Yuxuan said softly, as if it was the order of an emperor. Come down. Clang. A large trash can fell onto the rooftop. The system, who was hiding in the trash can, suddenly heard Yi Yuxuan's words. Furthermore, when the needle of the fate roulette suddenly moved, he knew that something was wrong. As expected, he couldn't control it and was pulled from the space to reality by Yi Yuxuan. Even though Yi Yuxuan's heart was incomparably calm, there was a trace of surprise. He looked at his fingertips, and his face became even paler, as if all his strength had been sucked away by those golden threads. And the roulette also began to dissipate. It seemed that because Yi Yuxuan's body was too weak, his connection with the roulette was cut off with a command. Yi Yuxuan could only see the golden feathers of light again. Chapter 1977. But he couldn't see the huge wheel anymore. She was also shocked and jumped back. What the hell, it was the top floor, what kind of thing was falling down? If it fell on top of his head, his reputation would be over. If the number one fortune teller was killed by a flying disaster, his reputation as a fortune teller would be gone. Yi Yuxuan looked at his fingers strangely. Just now, when he gave the order. He felt like it was only natural. It was as if he knew that he could control these golden things. But this kind of feeling was extremely absurd. Because of his rational analysis, before he met Wei Wei Bai, he didn't look at these things. Today, he dared to touch it because he observed it for a long time before he took the risk to do so. Once he reached out, the order came out of his mouth involuntarily. The system, who was hiding in the trash can, was stunned. Yi Yuxuan's ability was awakened, and he could command those powers without anyone to teach him. It thought of its useless host. Then it looked at people like Yi Yuxuan. The system was infuriated when it compared itself to others. Yi Yuxuan walked to the trash can and opened the lid expressionlessly. The system was revealed. The system curled up into a ball, staring with a pair of bright red eyes, and a head of flamboyant red hair, standing up like it was about to explode. He looked to be about 10 years old. Strange, wasn't he 7 or 8 years old the last time? Yi Yuxuan's eyebrows moved slightly. You can grow up. System, he didn't grow up, he grew up long ago, it's just that his body shrank when he lost his power. He grew up because his power returned to a little. She was confused, and tried to calculate with his fingers. Something incredible seemed to have appeared. He calculated, he couldn't calculate his fate. What the hell was with Yi Yuxuan? It was so difficult to earn money. Yi Yuxuan reached out and grabbed the system's collar lightly. His expression was indifferent, and his eyes were sharp and cold. Why would the red string hurt Wei Wei? A gust of cold wind blew. The system was shaking, and he was crying. Even the trash can wasn't safe. Once Yi Yuxuan's power awakened, the system felt that he would be able to find him no matter where he hid. So the system told him the truth. Because the red string is like a locator, her soul can't escape from the red string. Every time her soul returns, your red string will prevent her from returning to her body. This should be clear enough, right? The system didn't mention the incomparably tyrannical power in Yi Yuxuan's body. After all, it was too troublesome. If anything was leaked, it would endanger Bai Weiwei. That wouldn't work either. Yi Yuxuan looked at the system coldly, causing it to tremble. Finally, he said, "You're not lying to me because you're jealous of my relationship with her, are you?" The system lost its voice. Jealous? Yi Yuxuan looked him up and down, a trace of disdain in his eyes. The system's voice changed. Bad thoughts? Yi Yuxuan said, "Otherwise, why do you have to stay by her side? Do you have some bad intentions?" The system was thunderstruck. Bad intentions? Yi Yuxuan's pale lips curled up slightly, and this smile was filled with ruthlessness and irritation. He was affected by dreams. The personality of the man in the last dream was filled with impulsive and ruthless emotions. Although Yi Yuxuan had always been suppressing it, once his emotions fluctuated. Then, a strange state of schizophrenia would appear. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://sashu.com. Chapter 1978. You've been by her side all the time, you've never left her side. You're the one who's controlling her recovery. If you don't have any ulterior motives, why are you doing this? Traces of gloomy violence appeared in Yi Yuxuan's eyes. It was extremely terrifying. The system felt like it was going to lose its life. Yi Yuxuan questioned it word by word, "Do you have feelings for her?" Yi Yuxuan was not Wei Wei Bai. He would not trust anyone so easily. This thing could not even be called a person. Hence, Yi Yuxuan became even more cautious. The system looked like it had suffered a huge blow. Feelings of love? There was nothing between him and the host. There were no unspoken rules, no bad intentions, and no dark deals. What the hell was with feelings of love? Damn, what dirty thoughts did Yi Yuxuan have in his mind? The system immediately shook its head. No, how could I have feelings of love? She's not even a woman in my eyes. How could I have any bad intentions? Yi Yuxuan also felt like his emotions were being controlled by ruthlessness. He stabilized his emotions and calmed down. Is there any way to not hurt her when the red string is not broken? The system, Yi Yuxuan grabbed the system's collar tightly, almost strangling it to death. The system quickly said, "Do you dream every time?" Yi Yuxuan did not hesitate and nodded calmly. The system roared, "Don't stay at the door of the dream every time you're done dreaming." In front of the door of reality, after Yi Yuxuan finished his dream, he left his strongest soul power there. Although it was because he was attracted to Wei Bai's soul. However, this attraction would take away Wei Bai's weak soul. Yi Yuxuan, door of the dream. The system was also angry. Every time you finish your dream, you'll be guarding the door of the dream. Every day, you'll follow the red string to hurt her soul. If you really like her, then control your power and return to reality completely. Don't block the road. These few planes had scared him out of his wits. Yi Yuxuan's soul power was firmly guarding the end of the reality tunnel. Without the guidance of the red string, he could still deceive them and successfully return with Wei Bai. But once there was a red line, Wei Bai became the most obvious target. He would be dragged away by Yi Yuxuan's strength. Yi Yuxuan pondered for a moment and finally said softly, "I don't understand." He really didn't know. What was the intersection of dreams? The system tried its best to teach him. It means that after you finish your dream, after you die in the dream, you will think of a way to return to reality by yourself. Every time Yi Yuxuan woke up from a dream, she would definitely not have the memory of a soul fragment returning to her. Because the memory fragment he returned to would be directly swallowed by the soul power. Then, that perverted soul power would automatically guard the entrance to reality. Using its paranoid instinct, it wanted to snatch away Wei Bai's soul. Yi Yuxuan's face was still calm, but the blankness in his eyes did not disappear. She was speechless. It felt like he, the fortune teller, had become a background character. Yi Yuxuan lowered his eyes and pondered, as if he was collecting the system's words and understanding them again. Finally, he asked, "So it was me who was hurting her? And not the red string?" The system sneered. "You just realized." Yi Yuxuan suddenly looked up, his cold eyes made the system's smile stiffen. "You still haven't told me, what is your purpose for staying by her side?" The system, what purpose could he have? He was the system, and Wei Bai was the host. Have you ever heard of the host not being with the system? Have you ever heard of it? There was no need for a reason at all. This was a fated meeting. Suddenly, the door to the rooftop opened and Wei Bai's voice sounded. "Yi Yuxuan, the doctor wants you to lie down." She paused and her eyes fell on Yi Yuxuan's arm. At the end of his arm, his fingers were clutching a child. Everyone turned to look at her, and the scene was silent for a moment. Looking at this group of sneaky people, Wei Bai couldn't help but ask, "This is your illegitimate child?" Yi Yuxuan, the fortune teller. The address, http://www.sashu.com/crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com///// Chapter 1979. He was caught off guard by this facade. The system was even more confused. It looked at Yi Yuxuan, then looked at the fortune teller. It even looked at its trash can. Then, almost as if its hair stood on end, it immediately swung Yi Yuxuan's hand away and jumped onto Shi. There was only one thought in the system's mind. It couldn't let Wei Bai find out about her relationship with Yi Yuxuan. The man who couldn't expose her strategy was Yi Yuxuan's emotional fragments from the beginning to the end. He had been waiting for Wei Bai to take away Yi Yuxuan's luck and be able to live a peaceful life. He had waited for too long. If Wei Bai knew that Yi Yuxuan was an emotional fragment, then, when she returned to reality, her feelings for Yi Yuxuan would deepen day by day. Once the feelings in reality reached a critical point, the plane's shielding device wouldn't work. The accumulation of feelings from so many planes would completely explode in reality. The depth of that kind of feelings wasn't much less than Yi Yuxuan's. This kind of emotional outburst would kill her. Now, Wei Wei Bai and Yi Yuxuan's interactions were conflicted and vigilant. Because Wei Wei Bai didn't allow herself to have too deep of a good impression of Yi Yuxuan while she was still in the strategy. Not to let Wei Wei Bai find too many suspicious points, the system never stopped her from meeting Yi Yuxuan. When watching her interact with Yi Yuxuan, he let nature take its course. He trusted Wei Wei Bai's self-control very much. She wouldn't put in bone-deep love for Yi Yuxuan while she was in the strategy. But the secret was revealed. Not to mention the emotional outburst. Wei Wei Bai still had a tribulation point that he hadn't mentioned. It was when her life points reached a peaceful life. To preserve these life points, she had to stay as far away from Yi Yuxuan as possible. This was because her luck and HP were all taken from Yi Yuxuan. However, Yi Yuxuan's providence and fate were much stronger than hers. The only reason why she could take away his HP was because Yi Yuxuan was open to her. The most important thing was that the strategy of conquering the plains allowed Wei Wei Bai to be stained with Yi Yuxuan's life force. Once she had taken away enough HP, she would stop the planar invasion. So, the final mission was to kick Yi Yuxuan out of the picture, severing the fate of the two people. Because once she gave up on the strategy, she wanted to live a stable life. Then, the aura of the plane that she had stirred up belonged to Yi Yuxuan. They would all dissipate. At that time, no matter how much Yi Yuxuan loved her, he wouldn't be able to control himself and would take away Wei Wei Bai's life points again. Just like in the beginning, before he had feelings for Wei Wei Bai. As long as he stood beside Wei Wei Bai, he would take away Wei Wei Bai's life points. Wei Wei Bai's soul was too weak compared to his. She couldn't win against Yi Yuxuan. Her current life points were all Yi Yuxuan's aura and couldn't be removed. Unless she didn't stop, and Yi Yuxuan continued to love her. Then they could be together. But it was impossible to keep conquering. That would tire Wei Wei Bai to death. So, once the strategy was over, Wei Wei Bai would be further away from Yi Yuxuan. The safer. This was an extremely cruel ending. From the beginning, the system knew that once Wei Wei Bai started to take away Yi Yuxuan's life points, in the end, the two of them couldn't be together. Wei Wei Bai's feelings weren't deep, so she wouldn't be hurt when she completely left Yi Yuxuan. The system clung to the fortune-teller's body and a bunch of questions flashed through its mind. It couldn't let Wei Wei Bai know that Yi Yuxuan was the target of the strategy. It couldn't let her find out that it knew Yi Yuxuan. It couldn't let Wei Wei Bai and Yi Yuxuan's feelings for each other were so deep that they couldn't be separated. Is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1980. Because he was still waiting for his life points to be enough, then he would start stirring up shit. She had ruined their feelings for each other, so that Wei Wei Bai could live a peaceful life. This atmosphere was too bad. Bai Weiwei finally glanced at the system with some uncertainty. Children nowadays were too unconventional. It was fine if he wore contact lenses. Her hair was dyed a bright red. Wouldn't his parents beat him to death? Wei Wei Bai tried to say, I'm sorry to disturb you. I'll go down first. This scene was too strange and scary. It was fine if Yi Yuxuan stared at her. That child stared at her too. Even a blind man stared at her. What's wrong? Did he suddenly realize that she was so beautiful that he was deeply in love with her and planned to destroy the earth for her? Otherwise, why did they look like they had eaten a nuclear bomb, as if it was the end of the world? Yi Yuxuan looked at the system thoughtfully. Then he took 2 steps forward. His eyes turned to Wei Wei Bai and softened. I don't have an illegitimate child. Yi Yuxuan pointed at the system and said, he is blind, I have an illegitimate child. Wei Wei Bai looked at Blind strangely. Blind moved his lips and said with difficulty, this is a poor child I gave birth to when I was fooling around outside. His mother died in a car accident. I was blind and couldn't take care of him, so he ran away from home and came here. when Blind said these words. His expression was unusually ferocious, as if someone was pulling his mouth and forcing him to say it. Wei Wei Bai silently took 2 steps back, frightened by Blind. Blind suddenly burst into tears and hugged the system. Son, where are you going to abandon me? I told you not to become a homeless child. Why didn't you listen and run away? Yi Yuxuan's eyes fell on the system. He seemed to be shy and hugged Blind tightly. His face was buried in Blind's clothes, and he didn't dare to look at Wei Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan's eyes turned cold. Wei Wei Bai didn't know that it was him in that dream. And this thing was doing its best to prevent him from telling her. Would this also endanger Wei Wei Bai? Although the appearance of the system made Yi Yuxuan feel a sense of crisis. But he observed for so long and confirmed that the system didn't cause any harm to Wei Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan, who was just about to tell the truth, once again looked at the system with cold, interrogative eyes. But he didn't tell her the truth. Bai Weiwei was also speechless at this scene. She was not stupid. There was definitely something fishy about this situation. However, these people clearly didn't want to tell her, so she couldn't just stick her hot face to their cold buttocks and force her way in. Bai Weiwei's mind didn't turn to herself. After all, it couldn't be her illegitimate child. Her attention was finally on Yi Yuxuan. He didn't look good. His sickly pale face had a hint of gray. His handsome face had a hint of malice and cruelty. His tall and slender body was like a bamboo in the cold wind on the top floor. He gave off a murderous aura. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She took a few steps forward and held Yi Yuxuan's fingers. Sure enough, it was very cold. His body hadn't recovered yet, but he came here to enjoy the wind. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but nag, do you know how to take care of yourself? Do you think your body is very strong? You just had a gastric lavage and you're running around. Do you really think you're a robot? Go back to the ward and lie down, Yi Yuxuan. Her tone was complaining and worried. The emotions that were inadvertently revealed dissipated the darkness in Yi Yuxuan's eyes. The calm calculations in his mind were all covered up by the warmth of her fingertips. Chapter 1981. Yi Yuxuan obediently bowed his head when she complained. He let her hit and scold him, but he didn't fight back. His soft black hair fell on his forehead. His dark eyes were covered by shadows, but with a soft light. All of a sudden, he looked fragile. In the dream, he met her when she was unhappy. He often looked like this, as if pretending to be pitiful could make her pity him. If it was the normal Yi Yuxuan, he wouldn't show this kind of emotion, and even look at Wei Wei Bai with this kind of expression. But the influence of the dream will always be there today. Once Yi Yuxuan didn't suppress it, his personality and the personality in the dream would infect each other. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of confusion, although the memory was vague. But Xia Hanyang's appearance overlapped with Yi Yuxuan's expression. A trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. She suddenly grasped his hand a little hard. Yi Yuxuan didn't resist at all, but the little puppy light in his eyes disappeared. Instead, he regained his calm and gentle side. His tone was neither fast nor slow. My physical condition is okay. Qin Qiu exaggerated my condition. That sense of familiarity was gone. Wei Wei Bai's doubts in her heart also disappeared, thinking that she was wrong. She shook her head. It's better to rest more. Don't make people worry. Yi Yuxuan also had such a capricious time. He was sick but didn't stay in the hospital. But it was also her fault that he was hospitalized. She had to recite it. Yi Yuxuan nodded and let go of the system for the time being. Then he was led away by Wei Wei Bai. The cold wind blew on the rooftop of the building. Blind's mouth was finally not controlled by anyone. He said with difficulty, "What's this again? Are you a peer or a visitor from another world? You're so skilled in the art of control." Blind admits defeat. Blind, was this kind of self-proclamation really okay? The system didn't say anything. Instead, it reached out and uncovered an undiscounted control charm from the supermarket on Blind's back. The one-time charm dissipated in the air. Blind finally returned to normal. Just now, when he was hugging the system and yelling that this was his son, he was dumbfounded. To think that he, the #1 fortune teller, would be manipulated just like that. Moreover, he couldn't figure out what the thing on his body was. Was he human? At the very least, Yi Yuxuan still had a person's destiny. It was just that he couldn't calculate it. This thing didn't have a destiny string, so it didn't look like a human at all. The system ignored Xia and said coldly, "You blind man, don't meddle in other people's business in the future. Keep the red string and get the money from Yi Yuxuan. But don't do it again. You've already crossed the line by tying the red string of fate. The next time you dare to tie something to my people, I'll kill you even if I have to risk the punishment." The system's original line was, "How dare you tie something to my host," but just as it was about to speak, it realized that it could not reveal the identity of the host and the system. Change it to Laozi's people. Why did it sound so awkward? When Xia heard this, he thought, "My people." He even said that he had no feelings for Wei Bai. His intentions were finally exposed. If Yi Yuxuan knew, it would be strange if she didn't strangle this thing to death. Xia calculated with his fingers. Could it be that Wei Bai was lucky in love this year? Indeed, although her luck and destiny were weak, her entire body was filled with a pink aura. Her body was surrounded by the ominous color of love luck. But he couldn't calculate where the peach blossoms were transported to. When Xia put down his fingers, he realized that the system was gone. Even the trash can was gone. It was as if he had a strange dream. Chapter 1982. She silently wiped his sweat. It was not easy to earn money from the boss. However, if he stayed by Yi Yuxuan's side and absorbed his life chart aura, his luck would be very good in the future. And if he couldn't break through his fortune-telling skills, he would be able to break through. More importantly, Yi Yuxuan was too rich. After thinking about it, she still decided to be thick-skinned and planned to always work for Yi Yuxuan. The system hurried back to Wei Bai. If Yi Yuxuan could suppress his power, then the red line would not be an obstacle to returning to reality in the future. The red line had to wait until the end to break. He thought about it. Once Wei Bai's strategy was completed, he would leave Yi Yuxuan. He would try his best to destroy the red line. The fate that they had gathered together would completely disappear. At that time, it would be difficult for them to meet. The system thought with a cold face. Life was much more important than love. In the beginning, he chose to let Wei Bai attack Yi Yuxuan. He had already chosen to let Wei Bai live. The system suddenly felt the gloomy side of death. He looked down and saw Yi Yuxuan look up, that cold eyes fell accurately on him. The system shrank back, but found that no matter where it shrank, Yi Yuxuan could see it. "Well, I won't shrink back, let him see." Wei Bai cut the fruit and asked Qin Qiu to eat together. Yi Yuxuan only ate light, liquid food. He couldn't eat things that were too cold and hard. Qin Qiu was really worried that the fruit cut by Wei Bai would be poisonous. But seeing Wei Bai eat with relish, he saw that she was not poisoned and sat down to eat. Wei Bai ate the fruit and served Yi Yuxuan porridge. Yi Yuxuan's expression was a bit strange. The way she took care of him was not gentle. But it was very natural. This kind of familiar attitude made him feel very good. Not long after soaking in the ward, Bai Changyan also came. He came with fruit, chicken soup, and the chef's dinner box. Wei Bai would wake up 3 days later. He was used to this rhythm. Moreover, Yi Yuxuan was also hospitalized these days, so Bai Changyan was in charge of their meals and clothes. After Bai Changyan came, it was more lively. Yi Yuxuan was still eating the tasteless liquid food. He had no desire for food. Bai Weiwei sat next to him with a sumptuous meal box in her arms, looking at him unhurriedly and elegantly drinking porridge. Although she felt sorry, but the food was too delicious, she waited until she was full. Bai Changyan and Qin Qiu planned. The two semi-retired old men had nothing to do and had a lot of time. Therefore, they set up the chessboard and fought all night long. Bai Weiwei had nothing to do, so she stared at the chessboard and excitedly came up with a few ideas. It made the battle worse. The system ate the biscuit silently and found that Yi Yuxuan was staring at it again. It hugged the biscuit and curled up in the corner. It also had to eat dinner. What was the meaning of staring at it? It still had to eat. Then the system turned its back and tried to ignore Yi Yuxuan's murderous eyes. Like a little bamboo rat, it gnawed its dinner. It found that that thing ignored it. Yi Yuxuan retracted his gaze and lay down to think carefully about what happened during this time. He thought about it deeply. Too many fragmented memories made his head hurt. After all, shuttling through more than 20 worlds, so many painful memories. It was too cruel for him to really sort them out. Suddenly, two cold fingers pressed on his temples. It was like Yi Yuxuan massaging his headache every time he woke up. Weiwei Bai was also worried and bent over. There was some worry in her eyes and her fingers pressed on his temples. She asked softly, "Is it very uncomfortable?" Collect below to record this reading record. Chapter 1983. He looked like he was having a headache. Yi Yuxuan stared at her blankly for a few seconds before shaking his head. "I'm fine." Weiwei Bai smiled. "That's the bad thing about you. You're clearly in pain, but you still insist that you're fine." It was especially hard to care about this kind of person. Weiwei Bai massaged his temples while softly nagging him about some small things. She told him to pay more attention to his body. Yi Yuxuan's expression gradually softened. In the ward, Qin Qiu and Bai Changyan were squatting in a corner far away playing chess. Beside the bed, Weiwei Bai massaged Yi Yuxuan's head. Perhaps it was because he was really too tired during this period, plus the gastric lavage made his body very weak. Yi Yuxuan slowly closed his eyes and felt the warmth of her fingertips. Then his breathing gradually stabilized. He finally fell asleep. Weiwei Bai felt that Yi Yuxuan was really a weirdo. His body was so weak, but he could still be so tense and not relax. Weiwei Bai rubbed her fingers and returned to her bed. She nagged at Bai Changyan, "Dad, don't stay up too late. Sleep early." Bai Changyan was excited. "It's fine, Weiwei. Dad has plenty of time." "Nonsense," everything was pushed to Yi Yuxuan. "Of course you have plenty of time." Weiwei Bai lay down, pulled up the blanket, closed her eyes, and said to the system, "What's wrong with you? Are you in a bad mood, or did something happen?" The system didn't say anything for the whole day. Did something happen? The system was still chewing on its biscuits. Seeing that Yi Yuxuan was asleep, it dared to speak. "It's fine. I need to rest too. I'm going to take a nap." Weiwei Bai felt that it was very strange. Yi Yuxuan, that fortune teller, and that red-haired illegitimate child. And the system. How could they be so strange that they were of the same origin? Weiwei Bai couldn't help but mutter, "If I didn't know that you have nothing to do with Yi Yuxuan, I would have thought that Yi Yuxuan saw you." She had suspected for a long time. Because Yi Yuxuan was present, the system did not dare to speak. She had always suspected that Yi Yuxuan could hear the system. Otherwise, why would the system's attitude be so strange and cautious? The system stopped chewing on the biscuit. It stiffened for a moment before regaining its calm expression. His voice was very calm. "Yi Yuxuan is a child of destiny with a lot of life points. Sometimes, he can hear things that normal people can't, so to prevent my presence from being exposed, I will not speak." "Weiwei Bai, is Yi Yuxuan that awesome?" The system said, if you weren't that powerful, you wouldn't have been able to gain so much HP. Your HP is full now, 6,500 days. Wei Weibai heard this and felt relieved. Yi Yuxuan was such a strange person, it was possible for strange things to happen. Wei Weibai sighed and said, I have always suspected that you have some kind of relationship with Yi Yuxuan. The system said, what kind of relationship can we have? I only have a relationship with you. Wei Weibai smiled. You sound so intimate. As long as you didn't do anything to hurt me, it's good. The system hesitated, but still said, if I hurt you. I mean, if I do something wrong occasionally, you won't be angry, right? Bai Weiwei still had a smile on her face, I also do wrong, how can I be angry with you? But if you hurt me, I will beat you to death. If the system did something wrong, it was his fault. But if the system hurt her, it was not wrong, it was betrayal. Wei Weibai said eerily, if you ask this, did you do something to hurt me? The system trembled, the biscuits almost fell out. He held it in for a long time before saying, no, I didn't. Wei Weibai smiled again. I knew you wouldn't hurt me. The system was the person she trusted the most after she came back from the dead. Wei Weibai was also joking. If he really did hurt her, what could she do? Forgive him, his life was given by the system. Wei Weibai could not bite the hand that fed her. The system silently wiped its cold sweat. It felt that the day Wei Weibai completed the mission would be the day it died. Suddenly, Wei Weibai said, let's go to the next world. The system said, so soon? Wei Weibai looked at Bai Changyan, then looked at Yi Yuxuan who was sleeping peacefully. She could not help but smile gently. I want to return to my normal life as soon as possible so that they won't worry. Whether it was the system, Yi Yuxuan, or her father. She was in too much debt. She wanted to live a long life and be good to them. The system was silent for a while before saying, okay, let's go. Chapter 1984. Beautiful music started playing. Wei Weibai opened her eyes and saw herself standing on a stage. Under the dark stage, there was a full audience. Before her memory came back, the system's voice sounded, the side quest rewards you with the peerless dance pose. Hurry up and dance. Wei Weibai was full of question marks. But because she trusted the system, she followed the rhythm of the music and gently raised her hand, like an elegant swan. Her slender waist was soft like a willow branch. When she bent down, the skirt opened up like a spinning flower. She didn't even know what dance the original owner did. She just followed her instincts and her body followed the music. The system said, the peerless dance pose guarantees that your every dance will be beautiful and no one can find fault with it. Also, the dance's soul is off the charts. Anyone who sees it will love it. Anyone who sees it will feel that it is full of spirit. There will definitely be no so-called craftiness because the dance is too perfect. At this time, you only need to. Wei Weibai, did the system forget to keep its mouth shut while it was reciting the advertisement? The system hurriedly coughed a few times, trying to get away with it. When she bought the dance pose, she accidentally recited the advertising message as well. Wei Weibai didn't know what the so-called peerless dance pose looked like. She only knew that when she danced, her feet were terrifyingly light. It was as if every movement of her hand or leg was exceptionally beautiful and smooth. She didn't hear the system say anything else. Wei Weibai focused on dancing. After the dance, she would look for a target. It was a beautiful jump, and the audience applauded one after another. Today was the first performance of the stage play, Jade Flower. Wei Weibai was the main character. Even the teacher who rehearsed the dance had doubts about Wei Weibai's ability. After all, Wei Weibai's attitude wasn't good. She relied on the fact that her parents were investors. Even the rehearsal dance was always late and early. When she danced today, the teacher who helped with the rehearsal was in despair. For the survival of the dance troupe, they had no choice but to let Wei Wei Bai go on stage. But they didn't expect Wei Wei Bai's dance. It made everyone's eyes light up. That spirit, that waist, that step. It was perfect and smooth like water, like a flower. A light pink dress, a light white belt, a slim waist, and a palm-sized face, a pair of beautiful almond-shaped eyes. It was pure and beautiful. Like a fairy who walked out of a dance. Wei Wei Bai didn't even think about how she danced. The rewards of these planes were truly of little value. But sometimes they could be of help. For example, the top student from last time, if she did not cheat with the genius's secret book, she would not have been able to complete the side mission. This time, a dance reward. Could it be that the mission was related to dancing? Just as Bai Weiwei was thinking this, a voice came to her ear. Target discovered target. This mission is to obtain Jiang Joshi's love. Target. Jiang. Time, 1 year. She had just finished her dance. She bent her waist lightly, raised her arms lightly, and then pulled them back to make a closing salute. Then she raised her face. Her almond-shaped eyes were crystal clear. She looked straight at the audience. Where? Who's Jiang Joshi? The system said, the one sitting in the front row. There were so many people in the front row. It was hard to tell who was who. The lights in the audience lit up. Everyone came back to their senses from Wei Wei Bai's dance. They immediately clapped. Some people even stood up. Then, Wei Wei Bai saw a man in the front row. He didn't clap, but he didn't stand up either. Address of the https://www.sashu.com download of the https://www.sashu.com read of the https://m/sashu.com button below to record your reading record. Chapter 1985. Under the White Lights. The man sat there quietly, his eyes were extremely dark and his features were delicate with a bit of gloominess. He was wearing a gray suit and his back was straight as he sat in the middle of the front row. He used a very calm, but cold gaze to look at Wei Wei Bai. When she suddenly looked over, their eyes just happened to meet. Wei Wei Bai almost instinctively revealed a bright smile, those almond eyes filled with the light of the stage. Like a porcelain plate in summer with tinkling sounds. Unspeakably clear and pure. Jiang Joshi seemed to be a bit stunned. His gaze also froze on her for a bit before he casually moved away. The lights in the audience were white and cold. It gave his perfect side profile a gloomy light. Ding! The male lead's affection is at -20. Wei Wei Bai, he definitely has a grudge against her. She gave him a friendly smile and it became this negative. The system said, his initial affection before was -30. Wei Wei Bai, it seems like the target of this world definitely has a grudge against her. Otherwise, the initial affection wouldn't be this negative. Wei Wei Bai didn't look at Jiang Joshi again. She got off the stage and her body was soaked in sweat. Her feet were also faintly aching in her dancing shoes. Her heartbeat was also much faster than usual. Wei Wei Bai knew that this was normal because dancing required a lot of physical strength. After a dance, it could drain all of one's strength. Luckily the side reward was good, she only felt a bit tired. She didn't collapse. Wei Wei Bai went to the dressing room, there were still a few more performances for her. Including the group dance. She sat down and the makeup artist immediately came over to touch up her makeup. Wei Wei Bai was very natural as she directly closed her eyes. Then while the other person was touching up her makeup, she had the system give her memories. A familiar headache appeared. Pieces of memories also appeared. The male lead of this world had a grudge against her. No, he had a grudge against the original owner's parents. In any case, their hatred was more or less the same. The original owner's parents had a good business, and the original owner was the only child. The original owner liked to dance, so she was sent to learn dance early. However, neither talent nor perseverance were enough. As a result, she couldn't dance as well as others. The main lead of this stage play was also invested in by her family, and she was forced to go through backstage means to get the role. Many people were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. He said a lot of nasty things on the internet. If Wei Wei Bai hadn't come, the host would have been scolded by others for messing up the dance. As for Jiang Joshi's family, when Jiang Joshi was in elementary school, he was hit by the car of the original owner's parents and got into an accident. Moreover, the original owner's parents were afraid of taking responsibility, so they refused to admit that they had hit someone. As a result, Jiang Joshi's poor family did not have enough money to pay for the surgery, causing the best time for treatment to pass. He had crippled Jiang Joshi's legs. Bai Weiwei looked at the memories until here, although it wasn't a deep hatred like killing one's father or family, right? But it directly caused him to be crippled. It would be strange if he didn't hate the original owner to death every day. Back then, the original owner's parents drove so fast because they wanted to pick up the original owner for a trip. And Jiang Joshi was crippled, living a dark and miserable life. His parents also blamed themselves for not taking good care of him. And they worked hard to earn money so that they could install prosthetic legs for him. In the end, on the day of Jiang Joshi's middle school examination, the couple came back from another province. To save money, they took an unlicensed taxi and overturned the car. Bye-bye. Bai Weiwei saw this memory. What happened to not having a family feud? To facilitate the next reading, you can click on Chapter 1986. I'm waiting. Even if Jiang Joshi's parents were not killed by the original owner's family, it was also indirectly related. How magnanimous would Jiang Joshi have to be to not take revenge? After his parents died, Jiang Joshi lived a miserable life. He started to study hard alone, not caring about anyone's mockery. After that, it was precisely during the time when Jiang Joshi was self-studying in university. He caught the internet business opportunity and pulled in investments. After a few years of struggle, he was completely successful. Inspirational. Amazing. What Wei Wei Bai saw just now was Jiang Joshi after he succeeded. He was probably here to mock Wei Wei Bai. After all, Wei Wei Bai's dancing was not good, and more than one person knew that. In the end, she danced well, and his face was very ugly. The biggest problem now was Jiang Joshi's current power. Money and whatnot. They were more than one level higher than the original owner's parents. The original owner's parents were rich, and they were at most a second-tier company in the industry. It was not easy to do business these few years. They were faintly falling behind the third-tier companies. And Jiang Joshi's company was now a first-tier hot potato. A year's worth of money, the power involved. That was simply a behemoth that could crush a bunch of companies. Wei Wei Bai sighed. If Jiang Joshi was still poor, it would be easier for her to directly provide for him now. Now that the two of them were on different levels, she had to rack her brains to get close to him. Wei Wei Bai finished touching up her makeup and continued to dance. A stage play came to a perfect end. And Jiang Joshi had left early. He did not watch Wei Wei Bai's dance later. Looking at the -20 favorability, Wei Wei Bai asked the system, "Can I ask, what is his favorability towards the original owner's parents?" The system said, "It's harder to measure other people's favorability. There are only rough numbers, around -50 or -60. Wei Wei Bai, if one day Jiang Joshi suddenly couldn't think straight, it would be natural for him to kill their entire family to silence them. Such a low favorability rating. They could be slaughtered by the target at any time." Wei Wei Bai sighed. "I'm not used to coming to a plane with enemies." He had thought that in addition to the insane side quests in these planes, there was nothing else. As for the rest, there was no hatred. It was a better strategy. In the end, another person with a deep hatred appeared. Wei Wei Bai changed her shoes and clothes and went out with her bag. In the end, the dance troupe's teacher came over and happily surrounded her to greet her. He even brought her a handful of red roses. It was a flower prepared by the dance troupe for the newcomer to congratulate her for successfully taking on the leading role. Wei Wei Bai smiled adorably. Her appearance in this plane was especially delicate. She had a face the size of a palm, almond-shaped eyes, and snow-white skin. She looked exceptionally obedient and beautiful. The teachers thought that she was difficult to get along with. In the end, after some small talk, he found that this little girl was very obedient. Instantly, all his previous worries were gone. Wei Wei Bai smiled as she hugged the flowers and walked out. Such a small scene was nothing to her. After leaving the door, she stood by the roadside and waited for a car. It happened to be the rainy season in summer, and the rain pattered down. Wei Wei Bai didn't have an umbrella. Seeing that it wasn't raining, she stood in the drizzle with the roses in her arms. Her thick and slightly curly long hair hung down. Her eyelashes were stained with water vapor, making her look even more harmless. In the distance, a low-key black car was parked. Two people were sitting behind the car. One of them was Jiang Joshi. He leaned against the window and looked coldly at Wei Wei Bai, who was not far away. He saw that she was hugging the flowers with both hands. The flowers were too big. Her slender arms and soft fingers could barely hold them. She stood there obediently. Her clear eyes could be seen through the gaps of the flowers. They were like a spring, or like leaves after the rain, stained with hazy water vapor. Chapter 1987. A child from the Bai family? A young man tapping on a laptop beside him said. Jiang Joshi looked away and closed the car window. Then he closed his eyes and said, "Is the plan against the Bai family on the agenda?" The man, who was Jiang Joshi's special assistant, Wan Shan, revealed a malicious smile. It started. I guarantee that the Bai family will be bankrupt within 3 months. Jiang Joshi's expression was still silent and calm. His thin lips opened slightly. Within a month. Wan Shan's fingers paused. So soon? Didn't they plan at a moderate pace before? Jiang Joshi did not disregard others for the sake of revenge. Jiang Joshi did not speak. The rain outside fell on the window. His gloomy and cold face, like a marble sculpture, had a kind of incomparable coldness. Wan Shan silently deleted the plan and made a new one to crush the Bai family. Why was he suddenly so anxious? Wei Wei Bai had just waited for the car to arrive when she heard the favorability notification. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -10. Wei Wei Bai, what did she do? How did favorability come about? There were a few planes where her favorable impression of him skyrocketed, and they almost killed her. She was very cautious about the sudden increase in favorability. The system said, the male lead was staring at you from the car not far away. Wei Wei Bai, and then? The system, he just stared for a few seconds, then said that he was going to destroy your family and left. Bai Weiwei hugged the flowers and made some random guesses about the target of her strategy. Could it be that he took a liking to my beautiful appearance and that's why his favorability suddenly increased? When she looked in the mirror just now, she was also surprised by her own appearance. The appearance of this plane was beautiful. It was the kind of delicate and weak, extremely pure and cute beauty. Anyway, she did not have to do anything, she just had to stand there and smile. Look like she could arouse other people's favorability. System, I'm used to the host's daily narcissism. Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about how to get close to Jiang Joshi. The Bai family had a problem. The original owner's parents were busy dealing with a mess. Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about how to help. Whether it was the Bai family's stock or the various problems exposed on the internet, they completely dragged the company into the abyss. This was a clean and cruel method. It was too professional. Bai Weiwei went online and found that all kinds of negative news about her family business were endless. Even the higher-ups were investigating. The Bai family definitely had some black deals. There had even been problems with the tax collection. This was a big deal. During this time, to maintain her persona, Bai Weiwei did not expose the family's predicament. Instead continued. Because she found Jiang Jishi would come and watch. Every time, he would sit in the front row without saying a word or clapping. Every time she appeared, his deep eyes would land on her legs. Then the favorability would quickly. About a month had passed. The Bai family was forced to the brink of bankruptcy. And the favorability rose to 5 points. Weiwei Bai sorted out Jiang Joshi's hobbies and found that this guy seemed to like girls like her. Then, just as she was about to break the situation where they did not see each other and did not speak, the original owner's parents ran over. Weiwei, Dad is at his wit's end. After the family company goes bankrupt, I will be arrested and sent to jail. Please save Dad. Weiwei, Mom loves you, but the situation at home is bad. I'm sorry. The two of them cried to Weiwei Bai. Weiwei Bai asked the system, what's wrong? Why don't you buy me a stock mystery book and I'll take them out of the sea of misery? The system said, it's okay. There's still some time before bankruptcy. Wait until it's really bankrupt. Weiwei Bai's current persona was an innocent and cute little fairy. She did not understand this at all. So Weiwei Bai looked at her parents blankly and said very obediently, Dad, Mom, is there anything I can help with? She did not know that after she said that, she was stuffed into a car and waited for the system to say it was here. She was already standing in the presidential suite on the top floor of the hotel. Weiwei Bai sat on the sofa with a confused expression. And opposite her sat Jiang Joshi. Jiang Joshi lowered his head expressionlessly. He used a pen to write a contract. Under his drooping eyelashes, his eyes were eerily dark and cold. So, do you understand? To repay the debt, your parents sold you to me. Weiwei Bai, Jiang Joshi thought that she was frightened and could not help but soften his tone. Accompany me for a few days. I'll let you go when I'm tired of it. Weiwei Bai, so this time the target of the strategy. Was it automatically delivered to him? Download the at https://m.sashu.com/. Chapter 1988. Jiang Joshi lowered his head, but his eyes looked up slightly. The faint halo of light had an extremely cold and calm color in his deep, dark eyes. His gaze first landed on her well-behaved feet. Her feet didn't look big in the flat white shoes she was wearing. The ankles and calves exposed under the skirt were a little whiter than the color of the shoes. Her smooth skin was like a pearl in water. It was so beautiful and delicate that it looked like it was raised in a greenhouse. He held the pen, and the tip of the pen stopped somewhere on the contract paper. After looking at her legs for a long time, he quietly looked at the waist of her skirt. In the middle of the small floral skirt, there was a thin belt of the same color. Her waist looked unbelievably soft and thin. He had watched several dances. He knew how soft her waist was and how light her legs were. At first, he just wanted to see the child of his enemy. Later, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He didn't necessarily like her. He just thought that she looked good when she danced. Then one night, he had a dream. When he woke up and changed his pants, he finally had the idea of buying her. The 3-month plan was forcefully suppressed by him to 1 month. He even shelved many plans for the same period. In his eyes, the revenge of the Bai family was just a step-by-step plan. Even if the Bai family was forced into a corner, His happiness was only after drinking a glass of wine with his assistant. But now, looking at Wei Wei by sitting here. Jiang Joshi's fingers trembled slightly. He took a deep breath. He knew that the decision to buy her within a month was the right one. Because if he watched her dance for 3 months, then the obsession in his heart might become bigger. It was better to get it quickly and destroy her. This way, the beast in his heart could stop tormenting. Jiang Joshi pretended to finish writing the contract and looked up naturally. However, he saw a pair of teary eyes. She didn't make a sound. Her thin red diamond-shaped lips were slightly pursed, and her small and beautiful chin trembled slightly. The tears in her eyes couldn't fall. Her face was as white as pear blossom powder in March. It was indescribably delicate and pure. He was only 2 years younger than him. However, Jiang Joshi felt that she was very young and naive, as if she was his junior. There wasn't the slightest bit of turbid calculation in his eyes. It was really well taken care of. She was too delicate. After the Bai family's company went bankrupt, if she was not bought by him, she would be tortured by the poor life in the future. This kind of delicate and pure innocence would be gone. When Jiang Joshi thought of this, the faint sense of guilt in his heart instantly disappeared. He placed the contract in front of Wei Wei Bai and placed the pen on the table. His expression was cold, with a sense of superiority. All right, your family is in urgent need of a sum of money. This sum of money is relatively large, so I'll give it to your family in 3 installments. You'll accompany me for 3 months. Accompany me for a month and I will give you a sum of money. Right now, the Bai family was just a sacrificial offering in his hands. You can do whatever you want with it. Even 3 months later, he would be able to destroy the Bai family, who had the funds, once again. It was just a game. He was used to doing things this way. Wei Wei Bai's lips moved slightly. There were a few traces of bites on her lips and they turned slightly red. Jiang Joshi's gaze landed on her lips and then moved away. Then his gaze fell elsewhere and he no longer looked at Wei Wei Bai. The air was very quiet. It was even a little suffocating. Jiang Joshi did not hear her reply and was a little annoyed. Sign it now, or I won't invest. Your family will go bankrupt tomorrow, and the debt you owe is probably enough to make your parents jump off a building. Chapter 1989. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment, but still shook her head firmly. Jiang Joshi's fingers nervously pressed on the handle. Suddenly, he put his fingers on the wheelchair and used force to move the wheelchair forward. The room was designed to allow the wheelchair to move smoothly. It had been specially arranged. There wasn't even a thick fluffy carpet. Wei Wei Bai was still shrinking back. The system chatted with her, "Why are you scared? Go on, let the bullet screen army surround me." Wei Wei Bai, go on, he's a little idiot, no, a pure and cute little white flower. A man's bad habit has to be left hanging. The two of them finished chatting. Jiang Joshi came in front of her in a wheelchair. This guy was so disabled that he had to sit in a wheelchair, but his mind was strong. He must come over and destroy the pure and pitiful little white flower. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed from fear to doubt. She glanced at his leg, and the fear in her eyes was replaced by sympathy. Her clear eyes expressed clearly. It turned out that he couldn't stand up because he was disabled. It had been a long time since someone dared to show such a sympathetic and hateful expression in front of him. Jiang Joshi's expression immediately turned cold. An untrained little girl really didn't know how to be polite. If those who were familiar with this industry saw him like this, they would definitely laugh and not show the slightest bit of such an expression. It was simply courting death. Jiang Joshi's eyes were terrifyingly cold. However, he saw Wei Wei Bai breathe a sigh of relief. She looked at him helplessly, then looked at his leg. Finally, she asked, "Can't you stand up?" This sentence made Jiang Joshi want to strangle her. Saying this was like sprinkling salt on other people's wounds. But she still looked innocent and cute, and her voice was even soft. Jiang Joshi's face was tense, and he didn't say anything. Wei Wei Bai came to her senses, and she wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Suddenly, she smiled. This smile was lively and pure. Her red lips and white skin were stained with tears that had not been wiped clean. It was exceptionally stunning. Jiang Joshi was stunned. He even forgot to be angry. Then, he heard her sweet voice. "Uncle, that's not what you meant when you asked me to sign the contract. I was wrong. I'm sorry." After saying that, she stood up and bowed politely to him. He had an embarrassed look on his face. Jiang Joshi, what did he think wrong? Wei Wei Bai nervously clasped her hands together and asked cautiously, "Uncle, are you hiring me to be your servant and take care of you?" Jiang Joshi finally understood what she meant. Uncle. The two of them were only 2 years apart. Why did she call him uncle when she was only 2 years old? And to be a servant? Did she think that he wouldn't be able to stand up? Was that why she was so relaxed? Jiang Joshi choked on a mouthful of blood. It was so stifling that his eyes revealed a murderous look. But Bai Weiwei was like an innocent little white flower, looking at him anxiously. She looked obedient and happy. In an instant, Jiang Joshi did not know how to vent his anger. He tried to bear with it but still wanted to break her delusion. Wei Wei Bai quickly ran behind him and helped him push the wheelchair. I know. Tell me what you want. Do you want to go out and play? Or do you want to drink water? Or do you want something else? Jiang Joshi, looking at how she was like a little rabbit that had just escaped a calamity, that lively and innocent look of hers came out. Jiang Joshi could not bring herself to say those dirty words. Did he want her to sit on his lap? When Wei Wei Bai saw his crippled leg, she was not afraid of him anymore. Is at https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 1990. She seemed to want to work. When she saw the sweat on his forehead, she thought that he was overheating. She immediately ran to the table beside the sofa and took a tissue. Jiang Joshi did not reject her at all. Wei Wei Bai was already squatting down, carefully wiping his sweat with a tissue. She said softly, "Uncle, I'm sorry to misunderstand you, but it's easy to misunderstand Uncle's fierce face. So you're a good person who's helping my family. You bought me to protect me, right?" Jiang Joshi, he really wanted to say no. He wanted her to sit on his lap. But when he saw the smile on her face, her soft and adorable eyes, and her happy and pure smile after she relaxed, he couldn't help but feel his heart ache. He swallowed everything he wanted to say. He felt like he was really a dirty uncle. If he said anything more, he would sully her. Wei Wei Bai's smile was unbelievably bright. The little girl who had survived the crisis still did not know the hardships of the world and thought that everyone in the world was good. How could she be so? It made him want to beat her to death. Jiang Joshi took a deep breath and suddenly reached out to hold her wrist. It was slender, soft, and warm. It was a touch with the fragrance of her skin. It made Jiang Joshi's fingers tremble. He immediately let go, his face heating up. He rarely, very rarely touched a woman's body. Or even almost never. Because of this year, he finally had the time to deal with his own affairs. For many years, he was alone. Later on, when he did business, the people who were close to him were all business partners. When he worked hard to stabilize the company, he realized that he was old enough. He could do that. Then, he met Wei Wei Bai. Then, it was the first time he touched a girl's hand so closely. Jiang Joshi thought that with his age, experience, and maturity, he could handle everything. But the back of his hand was frighteningly tight. Wei Wei Bai touched her wrist strangely and thought of something. "Uncle, what do you want? Do you want water?" Without waiting for Jiang Joshi to reply, she had already run to get water. That obedient and cute look. She was a good child. Jiang Joshi looked at her clear almond-shaped eyes, holding a glass of water to his lips. It was his usual cold water. He didn't know what to do, but he lowered his head and drank a mouthful. The water had a hint of sweetness. Did she put sugar in it? Unknowingly, Jiang Joshi drank the entire glass of water. Bai Weiwei immediately smiled, "Uncle, I will take good care of you. Then please advise me in these 3 months." Jiang Joshi finally couldn't take it anymore. Did she really think that he had hired a servant? Was she really stupid or was pretending? The words that Jiang Joshi was about to say suddenly stopped. Because Bai Weiwei ran behind him and carefully placed her hands on his shoulders. "Are you tired? Let me give you a massage with that." She massaged his shoulders with moderate strength. Jiang Joshi was speechless. He couldn't say anything. What was going on? His body was extremely tense, and his shoulders felt sore and numb. Weiwei Bai asked, "Does it feel good?" Jiang Joshi was speechless. Very good. But he didn't hire a masseuse. Shouldn't she sit on his lap? She should go to the bed to give him a massage. Jiang Joshi's eyes finally hardened. He reached out to grab her wrist and pull her into his arms. But Bai Weiwei suddenly let go of his shoulder, and his fingers touched the air. Weiwei Bai then picked up her bag and said anxiously, "Uncle, I have to go home because of the curfew. I'll come back tomorrow. Goodbye." Jiang Joshi opened his mouth and was about to call her. Weiwei Bai hesitated and stopped. She turned around timidly. "Are you angry that I called you uncle?" Jiang Joshi frowned. He didn't think much of it and said, "I'm only 2 years older than you." Bai Weiwei's eyebrows relaxed, and the light in her eyes flickered. "Ah, I thought you were young and handsome, but you were a big boss, so I thought you were very old. It turns out you're so powerful, then I'll call you Gage from now on." "Brother," Bai Weiwei held it in her mouth, softly whispering to herself. "Brother." Jiang Joshi felt her eardrums buzz from the teasing. Weiwei Bai waved. "Bye-bye, brother." Jiang Joshi couldn't help but wave back. "Okay." When the door closed, the air froze. Jiang Joshi came back to his senses. He was stunned for a long time. His cold face finally twisted. Did he let her go just now? She didn't even sit on his lap. He felt that he had lost a lot of money. Tomorrow, he must do something that won't lose money. Jiang Joshi thought viciously. Chapter 1991. When Weiwei Bai returned home, she saw that the house was empty. There was a message on the fridge about her parents' trip. They said that they were going to travel around the world. They were too tired when they were young and wanted to see the world when they were old. It was obvious that they had sold their daughter and immediately escaped abroad after getting the money. Weiwei Bai didn't feel anything. She opened the fridge and took out some juice to drink. Then she ordered takeout and opened Weibo as she ate. Her Weibo fans had exceeded 500,000. The Yinghua dance drama exploded on the country's largest bullet screen. All kinds of bullet screen comments about the little fairy, as well as a variety of beautiful clips, brought her a lot of popularity. When she went to the theater to dance, she signed the kind of investment contract that went through the back door. That meant that she didn't get any money. Fortunately, the original owner's bank account still had some money. If she saved money, she wouldn't have starved to death on the streets like in the previous world. Moreover, the original owner's parents also doted on the original owner. They gave her a lot of pocket money. If the company didn't go bankrupt, the original owner's parents wouldn't have faced prison. Then she would still be living the life of a little princess. Weiwei Bai glanced at the comments on Weibo. There were a lot of comments about a little fairy descending to the mortal world. After a few glances, she took a selfie of herself on a whim. Then she wrote the rules. Hello everyone, I am Wei Wei Bai. I like to dance the most. Please give me advice. Thank you for liking me. The selfie was of her without makeup and hair. She was simple and lovely. Her beautiful almond-shaped eyes were pure and bright, as clear as a spring. One look and one could tell that she was extremely obedient. Then she went to Jiang Joshi's Weibo. There was a Weibo. It was just that one look and it was taken over by the company's public relations department. All of them were standard business announcements of various kinds. There was no human touch at all. She couldn't see Jiang Joshi's personal interests either. Even the followers were only the official accounts of a dozen or so large domestic companies. Wei Wei Bai closed Weibo, finished her meal, and went to bed. Before sleeping, she continued to think about Jiang Joshi's hobbies. No matter how she looked at it, Uncle Jiang was very pure. She felt as if it was the first time she had done such a dirty transaction between a man and a woman. Although his face was paralyzed, he didn't dare to force her or threaten her. It was obvious that he was a newbie. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her face and mumbled to the system, I'm going to be a pitiful little white flower again. The system was knitting a sweater. You're so happy, hee hee. Wei Wei Bai, yeah, I'm so happy, ha 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 ha. The host let out a burst of deranged laughter. The system silently continued to knit. This host was a little white flower fairy. She could clearly rely on her shamelessness to make a living, but she insisted on acting like a little white lotus flower. The system had a calm expression on its face, as if it had just ascended to immortality. Ah, I'm used to it. Jiang Joshi picked up a crutch with some difficulty. His leg had been reconstructed after years of massages. One of his legs was recovering very well. But the other leg was still very serious. The doctor had already started to plan an operation for him. Even though he had undergone surgery, it was still difficult for his severely injured leg to recover completely. Even if he could stand up, he would still be limping. But for Jiang Joshi, being able to stand up and take care of himself was enough. He was supposed to undergo surgery last year. But because the company wanted to go one step further and enter the international market last year, it was a very critical time. So he pushed away all his personal matters. To climb to the top all these years, he had put in unimaginable effort. Chapter 1992. He had even postponed his revenge on the Bai family and delayed it until this year before he started to take revenge in an orderly manner. He sat on a special chair and turned on the shower. He started to take a shower. He was thin, but his muscles could be seen. He was exposed to the cold water. Even if he couldn't stand up, he insisted on exercising. His arm strength was because he had been practicing boxing all year round and some upper body training to maintain his physical strength. One could see the unnatural bend of his leg. His muscles were also a little atrophied. It wasn't serious, but one could see the disability. Jiang Joshi was used to it and was very calm. But today, for some reason, he was the one who had been taking cold showers all year round to calm down. His mind was a little feverish as he looked at his severely injured leg. The car accident from many years ago was a little blurry. He couldn't remember the ferocious faces of Wei Wei Bai's parents. But the resentment at that time was still there. That resentment supported him to climb to his current position. But now that he had taken revenge on the Bai family, he didn't seem to be happy. Jiang Joshi thought of Wei Wei Bai who had left. He hadn't done anything to her yet. Was that why he was unhappy? Jiang Joshi stared at his leg for a long time before he realized that he was actually thinking about Wei Wei Bai's leg. Her legs were light, slender, and had beautiful lines. It was said that girls who learned to dance had very soft bodies. Very soft. Jiang Joshi silently washed his face with cold water and realized that his face was hot again. Wei Wei Bai went to the dance troupe as usual. The teacher might have heard about her experience and made a new contract for her. Because of the investment, the large-scale dance troupe that the troupe had been planning for 5 years was finally going to start rehearsing. And Wei Wei Bai could play one of the more important roles. The success of the Yinghua flower showed people Wei Wei Bai's spirit. So the teacher was willing to give her a chance and pay her. Wei Wei Bai signed the contract and tried her best to stay and rehearse. Then, he forgot about Jiang Jiushi for a moment. When it was finally time, she carried her bag, wore a pair of flats, and casually walked out with a pair of dancing shoes in her hand. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw a black car parked in the same spot. Wei Wei Bai pretended not to see it and stood at the intersection waiting for the bus. In the dark night, the street lights had just been switched on. Her long hair was tied into a bun, and a few strands of hair fell to the side of her face. Her face was still warm from the dance. There was a light pink on her fair skin. Jiang Jiushi sat in the car and looked at her for a long time. Suddenly, he instructed the driver to go over. When the car window rolled down, he saw Wei Wei Bai's surprised expression. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and revealed a brilliant smile. Her eyes were sparkling and she was indescribably cute. "Big brother, why are you here?" After asking this question, she suddenly thought of something and lowered her slender and beautiful neck in embarrassment. "I forgot to go to the hotel because I have to dance. I wanted to go home and take a shower before going to see you." Did she really think that she was going to be his maid? She was a very unqualified maid. Jiang Jiushi looked at her silently for a while. Seeing that her face was flushed red and she was smiling innocently. Really, she was too pure. Jiang Jiushi decided that he still had to teach her a little. So he said in a hoarse voice, "After you go home and take a shower, I'll get someone to pick you up." Wei Wei Bai laughed. "No need, I'll just take the bus." She was really heartless. She was also a little princess who was used to riding in a car. She immediately ran to take the bus. She was not unaccustomed to it. Jiang Jiushi did not know if she was stupid or heartless. Chapter 1993. He looked away and repeated, "You don't know the address." Then he ordered someone to drive. When the car started moving, he looked at the rearview mirror. He found that she was really standing there obediently with a pair of curious eyes as she watched his car leave. Jiang Jiushi was silent for a moment and suddenly asked, "Old Lu, that girl just now, did she look okay?" The driver, Old Lu, stuttered, "Yes, she looked pretty good." Then he said to the driver, "Take me to Xinxia." The driver was stunned. Xinxia sounded like a very pure place. But Old Lu knew that it was a high-end bar. People who said that it was high-end and played were all rich people. But the things inside were not high-end. There were all kinds of eating, drinking, gambling, all kinds of dancing, and all kinds of services. It was all dark and messy. Jiang Jiushi would not go to such a place if it was not for work. Now that the company was on track, it was others' turn to curry favor with him. So he would not go. When he arrived, it was the main part of Xinxia. Lively and noisy singing and dancing were everywhere, mixed with the smell of alcohol and cigarettes. The lights flickered, and men and women danced together. It was so big that it was unbearable to look at. But it was normal for a place like this. Jiang Jiushi did not enter the private room and went directly to the VIP round seat in the hall. A red sofa was moved away and his wheelchair was placed there. He drank expressionlessly. Yuan Shan had a strange look on his face. "Why are you enlightened today? You didn't come in the past." Jiang Jiushi's fingers paused, and he took a sip of wine before saying, "There's a small matter." Yuan Shan said, "What can there be?" "This is a place to eat, drink, and play." "Oh, right, there are a few new people today. They're very clean. I called them over for you." It was rare to see a 10,000-year-old iceberg enlighten. Yuan Shan was very happy. He knew that Jiang Joshi's leg was only disabled in the lower leg, but there was no problem with the upper part. Moreover, all these years of training, all kinds of boxing and so on, the coach was beaten away. His body was extremely sturdy. He had tried to get Jiang Joshi to hang out with him several times, but in the end, Jiang Joshi only had eyes for work. This made him, the special assistant, feel very frustrated. It was not interesting at all for a person to live like Jiang Joshi. Jiang Joshi originally wanted to reject those women, but thinking of something, he pursed his lips and didn't reject them. A few men who usually cooperated with Jiang Joshi immediately ran over with smiles on their faces and sat together with them. They talked about dirty jokes, women, money, and the like. It was vulgar, but it was refreshing. When he was almost done drinking, the women all came up, their hands going up and down, all kinds of unrestrained behavior. Jiang Joshi saw that the so-called newcomers that Wan Shan had mentioned were all wearing white dresses. He didn't know if it was intentional or not. She pretended to be innocent. However, those men who liked to dance, drink, and smoke were especially fond of it. Jiang Joshi, on the other hand, was expressionless. He felt that not a single one of them was pleasing to his eyes. But for the next plan, he still tolerated it. Finally, at the entrance of Xingxia, a timid figure that was completely opposite to the atmosphere here appeared. She also happened to be wearing a small white dress and light-colored flats. Her hair was still in a bun, and a few strands of hair were still scattered. She was like a little rabbit that had accidentally entered a wolf's den, not daring to take a step forward. When Jiang Joshi saw her, he finally sat up straight, his eyes sharp and deep. Huh, pure. Later, when she comes up, you guys be more unrestrained. The little white rabbit didn't know this, so he was going to teach her on the spot. Wan Shan immediately took off his clothes and hugged a woman with a smile. How is it? Unrestrained enough, right? Jiang Joshi, Wei Bai hesitated for a while, then suddenly saw Jiang Joshi. Jiang Joshi also saw her and was about to reveal a sinister smile. However, when he saw her tense little face, he relaxed immediately. As if she had seen her savior, she rushed over. Brother. Jiang Joshi looked at her coldly. She thought that she would be saved by seeing him. As a result, when Bai Weiwei rushed over, she tripped and her whole body flew over. She had a good foundation in dancing, so she immediately twisted her waist and didn't fall. However, she staggered a few steps and sat on Jiang Joshi's lap. Jiang Joshi only felt his legs sink as his body crashed into a soft body. His mind went blank for a moment, and his heart beat a few beats faster. She sat on his lap. Chapter 1994. Without waiting for him to react and savor this rare feeling, Wei Bai stood up with a whoosh. She blushed and sat down on the chair beside him helplessly. She moved away from him. But next to her was Wan Shan. This guy was half naked and had a girl in a white dress in his arms, laughing and joking. Wei Bai nervously sat beside the chair and almost fell on Jiang Joshi again. She didn't seem to know where this was. Her eyes were filled with shock and disbelief as she looked at Wan Shan in disbelief. Sitting in front of them were a few of Jiang Joshi's business partners. When they saw Wei Bai, they couldn't help but ask, Director Jiang, who is this? Is she from your family? Everyone's eyes were sharp. At first glance, Bai Weiwei looked out of place here. She wasn't like the people around her who pretended to be pure. Her temperament, dressing, and behavior were all a few grades higher than here. So for a moment, they didn't dare to open their mouths and flirt. Jiang Joshi glanced at Wei Bai beside him. She was nervously crossing her hands, and her fingertips were white. It seemed that she couldn't stand this place. And she was also very uncomfortable. Jiang Joshi looked at her indifferently for a few seconds before saying unhurriedly, "You're my god-sister." This didn't sound serious, and Jiang Joshi's tone was too ambiguous. When the people present heard this, they immediately understood and looked at Wei Wei Bai. Although she was a little pure, it turned out that she had such an identity. Wei Wei Bai heard that and looked at Jiang Joshi strangely. There was an unexpected smile in her clear eyes. Am I your sister? She couldn't tell that there was anything wrong with this address at all. Jiang Joshi didn't say anything vulgar. His mind was full of plans and waiting to be implemented. Everyone knew what the words God-sister meant. However, Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly and happily asked if she could really be his sister. The girls taught by the scums of the Bai family were really obedient. Not to mention these kinds of places. She probably hadn't even been in a relationship before. Jiang Joshi was a little annoyed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. He stared at Wei Wei Bai's pure and innocent eyes. She didn't want to say anything. She felt that she should directly show her what those girls who were giggling and lying on other people's bodies looked like. Then, learning more would seem like blasphemy to her. Jiang Joshi's too. Why was he so soft all of a sudden? Seeing that Wan Shan was still fooling around, Jiang Joshi could not help but give him a look. Wan Shan immediately understood. He looked at Bai Weiwei sympathetically. Then, he clapped his hands and said, "Let's play truth or dare and play a deck of cards." The waiter immediately served a new deck of poker cards. Draw the big dare of spades, draw the truth of hearts, draw the punishment of big and little ghosts, and draw the plum blossom to drink. Someone immediately started to jeer. What punishment? Wan Shan winked at him. What other punishment can there be? Kiss her or want more? Isn't there a private room upstairs? Open one. These words were so overbearing that even a pure person would be able to understand them. Jiang Joshi's gaze fell on Wei Wei Bai's face. She was at a loss. Then, her gaze fell on Jiang Joshi's face. Jiang Joshi pretended not to see her helplessness. He calmly reached out and pulled out a poker card. It was a plum blossom. Then, he expressionlessly picked up the glass of wine in front of him and downed it in one gulp. Slash. Chapter 1995. Wan Shan immediately took the lead to clap and shouted, "Brother Jiang has made a good start. Who's going to draw next?" Next was Wei Wei Bai's turn, who was sitting next to Jiang Joshi. Wei Wei Bai straightened her back and put her hands on her skirt. She looked at Jiang Joshi hesitantly. But Jiang Joshi still acted as if he couldn't see her pleading gaze. Wan Shan and a few others immediately slammed the table in dissatisfaction. "Little girl, we're still waiting. Why are you wasting time?" Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but purse her lips in fear. Then she reached out and carefully drew a card. It was a spade. A spade, a dare. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but ask, "What dare?" How could Wan Shan not know Jiang Joshi's thoughts? He just wanted to teach Wei Wei Bai a lesson. So that he could swallow this tender spring bamboo shoot. Now this bamboo shoot was too tender and pure. Then it would be tasteless. So now he was giving Wei Wei Bai a taste. If Sister Bai was bolder, with that little pitiful face. She was so delicate and pitiful that it could make men laugh. So Wan Shan immediately decided to make Wei Wei Bai bolder. So he said, "Now choose someone and sit directly on his lap. Remember to sit with your legs apart." Wei Wei Bai had just arrived, and the only person she knew was Jiang Joshi. With such a bold request, the person she wanted to choose would definitely be someone she knew. Not them. When Jiang Joshi heard this request, there was a hint of satisfaction on his face, but he hid it in a reserved manner. He was afraid that Wei Wei Bai would see that he was an accomplice. When Wei Wei Bai heard this request, her body trembled. She blinked helplessly. She seemed to think that this request was ridiculous. Wan Shan immediately threatened, "Can you afford to play? If you can't play, then why are you here?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes started to turn red. She lowered her head and leaned on Jiang Joshi, as if waiting for him to save her. Jiang Joshi coughed lightly. Don't go overboard, but this is just a small game, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a while before slowly standing up. Jiang Joshi immediately shifted his legs to a position that could withstand the force. He even changed the position of his arm so that he could support the waist of the person sitting on him. This little bit of training was not bad. Revenge had to be taken slowly. He had to hug her properly too. Jiang Joshi's thin lips couldn't help but curve into a smile. Then he saw Wei Wei Bai walk to a girl next to him. She looked at the girl in the white dress shyly, then put her hands on her shoulders and said softly, "Sorry to trouble you." After that, she gracefully sat down on the girl's lap. She said she would sit on the lap of the person sitting here. She didn't say whether it was a boy or a girl. Jiang Joshi, he didn't know where to put his hands and legs, so for a moment, they were stiff. After sitting for a while, Wei Wei Bai turned around curiously. Her almond-shaped eyes were full of careful inquiry. "Is it okay now?" When Wan Shan saw Jiang Joshi's expression, his face instantly darkened. He immediately said, Okay, you passed the dare." Wei Wei Bai's face was a little flushed. She looked a little excited, as if she had just done something amazing. She thanked the girl softly, then returned to sit beside Jiang Joshi. She looked at Jiang Joshi's awkward posture strangely, then blinked and said, "Brother, do your legs hurt?" Jiang Joshi silently relaxed the strength in his legs, then returned to his normal sitting position. Below to record this reading record. Chapter 1996. No. Is this game fun? He sounded like he was grinding his teeth. His tone was so gloomy that it made people feel numb. Wei Wei Bai smiled. "I've never been to a place like this before, nor have I played this game. I'm worried that I won't do well." Jiang Joshi smiled gloomily. "It's okay. We still have a long time. Let's continue playing." Wan Shan sensed his boss's cold gaze and immediately shouted, "Continue playing. Hurry up." Next was a man who drew a dare. Wan Shan didn't say anything. The man immediately said, "Sit on my lap. Do you understand?" He immediately picked a girl and sat on his lap, laughing loudly. Jiang Joshi and Wan Shan were speechless. "Sit on my lap. Get lost." Then, it turned to Jiang Joshi's side and drank again. Wei Wei Bai tried to draw. While others were playing truth, she was playing dare again. Wan Shan immediately said, "Dare. Choose a man and kiss him for 1 minute." Wei Wei Bai narrowed her eyes and looked at the poker cards. If she didn't know that these cards had been tampered with, she would have lived in vain. Otherwise, she wouldn't have just happened to drink with Jiang Joshi. She had been playing dare. When Jiang Joshi heard this request, he said hypocritically, "That's too much. How can you make such a request? It's not good for a girl." The people who came here were all having fun. When they heard Jiang Joshi's words, they couldn't help but laugh. A few girls with open necklines also laughed exaggeratedly. Wei Wei Bai's face was pitifully pale under the light. This game seemed to have scared her. Jiang Joshi thought to himself. Because of Wei Wei Bai, the atmosphere here, which was originally very lively, was actually a little restrained. After all, Jiang Joshi's intention to teach people was very obvious. And Wei Wei Bai obviously couldn't afford it. Therefore, everyone was measuring the degree of stimulation that was neither too big nor too small. He didn't go overboard. However, Jiang Joshi was still afraid that if it was too exciting, she would not be able to hold back and run away. It was rare for Jiang Joshi to be so patient with others. He said calmly, "Why don't I take my sister's place? But I'll change my gender." Jiang Joshi thought for a moment and felt that he was taking a big risk. Then, he would kiss Wei Wei Bai and gain her understanding. He could not help but smile. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth. No need. I'll do it. She was already so enthusiastic. Jiang Joshi didn't stop him. He even felt a little excited. It had been a long time since he had this feeling of anticipation. He couldn't help but adjust his posture. After all, his legs were inconvenient. If she really wanted to kiss him later, his posture would have to, Wei Bai turned her head and didn't even look at Jiang Joshi. She stared deeply at Wan Shan, her eyes filled with the determination to face death. Then, just as Wan Shan sensed the danger, Wei Bai had already pinched his face and was about to kiss him. Wan Shan was scared out of his wits and guts at once. If he really kissed her, he would be chopped up by Jiang Joshi. It was not easy for Jiang Joshi to take a fancy to a clean girl, but she fell into his hands. How could he live well? Just as Wan Shan was about to struggle and crawl away in fear, Wei Bai felt a weight on her collar behind her. She was pulled back forcefully. She was still pouting, her hands stretched forward with difficulty. It seemed that she had to kiss Wan Shan. Wan Shan was so scared that he immediately hugged the girl next to him. His face turned green and he moved back as if he had seen a ghost. Chapter 1997. Jiang Joshi's voice turned cold and his tone was extremely cold. Where are you kissing? Wei Bai finally realized something. She finally turned her head and saw Jiang Joshi's tense expression. The murderous look in his eyes was extremely scary. She seemed to be frightened and trembled. She couldn't help but mutter, "Aren't we going to do a dare? He's a guy." The murderous look in Jiang Joshi's eyes turned red. She didn't even look at him during the dare. They were the only ones who knew each other. When they first met, he was polite to her. She should have a good impression of him. But during the dare, she didn't even look at him. Did she despise him for being a cripple? Thinking of this, Jiang Joshi's eyes became bloodshot. He curled his lips coldly. Why did you choose him? I thought you would choose someone you know. Wei Bai was confused for a moment before replying seriously, I only know you, brother. But you have already recognized me as your sister. How can a sister kiss a brother? Also, I'm afraid you'll be angry. Jiang Joshi didn't expect to dig a hole for himself. She didn't understand the obvious and literal meaning of "godsister" at all. The murderous look in Jiang Joshi's eyes twisted a few times. He almost suffocated himself to death. He gritted his teeth and said, "We're not even related. Why would I be angry?" She definitely wouldn't care even if he said it. After all, in the eyes of Little White Rabbit, a brother was a brother. It didn't matter if they were related or not. Jiang Joshi snorted coldly and let go of her collar. When the theme started late at night, he would let her open her eyes. There would be pole erotic dances, XXXX demonic dances, and so on. No matter how pure a person was, they would all be baptized. Then, he would open a private room and drag her in. Once and for all. Why did he have to play this innocent brother and sister game with her? Jiang Joshi let go of her. With a cold expression, he picked up the wine and drank it expressionlessly. Wan Shan shivered. Those who knew Jiang Joshi's character would know that someone would be in trouble if he showed such an expression. Wei Bai's soft and careful voice sounded, "Brother, aren't you angry?" Jiang Joshi took another sip of wine and sneered, "I'm not angry." Suddenly, a pair of hands gently placed on his shoulders. He looked up in surprise, only to see her lowering her neck and closing her eyes as she leaned over. Before he could react, her kiss fell softly on his lips. They were like warm snowflakes that melted the moment they touched them. Jiang Joshi stiffened his neck, but he saw her leaving after a kiss. His voice was a little hoarse and urgent. "It's been less than a minute." Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled. She looked as weak as a butterfly's wings that were hit by the wind. Her face flushed red, but she lowered her head again and kissed his lips. Jiang Joshi tasted the taste of this kiss. It made him a little tipsy. Perhaps it was because he drank too much, but he even felt dizzy. His lowered eyes fell on her flawless skin. It was pink and delicate. It felt like a glutinous rice ball. He stiffened and didn't move. He didn't show her all kinds of mature skills as he imagined. Jiang Joshi was more like a fool. He didn't dare to move and even held his breath. It was as if there was a butterfly on his lips. He was worried that if he breathed too heavily, it would scare her away. Wei Wei Bai closed her eyes for a long time. Then, she finally couldn't help but leave him. Her face was red and she didn't dare to open her eyes. She asked, "Is it time?" Jiang Joshi said in a hoarse voice, "It's not time yet. It's only about 10 seconds. The person next to him, it's already been 3 minutes. Can you be a little shameless?" Wei Wei Bai frowned, seeming to be a little confused. Then she helplessly and obediently lowered her head, maintaining her previous position. Jiang Joshi heard the sound of his heartbeat, which seemed to be very fast. He finally breathed heavily and found that it was his heart that was beating fast. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 10. Comma. Chapter 1998. After the dare, Jiang Joshi brought her back. Because if he stayed any longer, it would start at midnight, and there would be all kinds of crazy scenes. A kiss had made him more patient. He didn't want to scare Wei Wei Bai. Jiang Joshi's personal assistant helped him push his wheelchair. Wei Wei Bai followed behind him cautiously. This time, they were going back to his apartment. Usually, there were almost no outsiders in the apartment except for the housekeeper and assistant. The apartment was very clean and tidy. It was cold and masculine. After Jiang Joshi entered the apartment, he said to his personal assistant, "You can go back first." The personal assistant glanced at Wei Wei Bai and nodded. Okay. Then, he left. Jiang Joshi sat in the wheelchair. He seemed to be a little tired as he closed his eyes. He could hear Wei Wei Bai's panicked breathing. It wasn't heavy, but it was very messy. After all, the thing that happened tonight would definitely be a shock to a sheltered person like Wei Wei Bai. But there was still a long time. Jiang Joshi also felt that his feelings for Wei Wei Bai were temporary and wouldn't last long. So, his patience was still okay. He suddenly said softly, "If you want to leave, you can leave first." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard Wei Wei Bai's footsteps. He opened his eyes coldly. She escaped too quickly. But he saw Wei Wei Bai pacing around a few rooms before finally entering the kitchen. Was she hungry? Then, he saw her appear again with a cup of warm water in her hand. The housekeeper put it in the thermos. She even made a slice of dried lemon. It was something that girls like to drink. Wei Wei Bai walked to his side and bent down to pass the cup to him. Her eyes were bright and clean. "Brother, drink some water." Jiang Joshi was stunned and suddenly said, "Feed me." Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment before carefully placing the cup by his lips. She bowed politely, neither too far nor too close. Jiang Joshi's eyes darkened. He lowered his head and took a sip before saying, "You should drink some too. Get close to him bit by bit and train him bit by bit." He didn't know that he actually liked raising people. Wei Wei Bai smiled. "You drink first." She didn't understand what he meant at all. Jiang Joshi was not annoyed. He continued to drink a few more mouthfuls before shaking his head. Then, he looked at Wei Wei Bai expectantly, as if he was waiting for them to kiss. However, Wei Wei Bai was very calm. She took the cup back to the kitchen, poured away the water, and washed the cup. She took a new, sterilized cup and poured some water into it. Then, she walked out and drank it in front of Jiang Joshi. He even revealed a gentle smile. Big brother is really a good person. It was a heavy blow from Little White Flower. Jiang Joshi reached out to cover his head. He was sure that Wei Wei Bai was real. She couldn't read his hint at all. If his legs weren't so bad and he had directly pressed her down, how could she continue to be so silly? However, Jiang Joshi forgot that his physical fitness and arm strength were amazing. As long as he tugged, she wouldn't be able to struggle free. It seemed that he was having a lot of fun with this raising game. Wei Wei Bai looked at him hesitantly and suddenly said, "Are you going to rest?" Jiang Joshi looked at her slowly, although there was some eagerness in his heart. However, when he met her clear eyes, he felt a trace of sympathy for her. "Let's continue tomorrow. It was very late today." So he nodded. "I'm going to rest." "If you want." Before he could finish, Wei Wei Bai had already walked over and put her hands in his armpits. "Crossover system, Adonis, come over here." You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.